The attack dog's lips peeled back, exposing teeth that could crush bone. 22 minutes. That's how long the animal had held the entire psychiatric ward hostage, its body a wall of muscle and rage blocking the doorway to room 447. Inside, a veteran screamed coordinates to a firefight that ended 8 years ago in Kandahar. Outside, hospital security gripped tranquilizer guns with shaking hands. "Someone needs to get in there now," the charge nurse hissed into her radio. "He's deteriorating." The dog's growl cut her off, a sound that belonged in a war zone, not a hospital corridor in downtown Seattle. Then a voice, quiet as smoke. "I'll go." Every head turned. Zara Vance stood at the nurse's station, her scrubs wrinkled from a double shift, her face forgettable in the way invisible people always are. The kind of woman you'd pass in a hallway and never remember. Dr. Marcus Hayward, the hospital's head psychiatrist, didn't even look up from his phone. Absolutely not. Security handles this. "Security can't get past the dog," Zara said. "Then we sedate the patient from a distance and trigger a full combat flashback that gets someone killed." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That man's brain thinks he's under fire. You corner him, he'll fight like he's still there." Hayward finally looked at her. Really looked. And saw exactly what he expected, a tired night nurse in her 40s who probably worked here because she couldn't cut it anywhere else. "Ms. Vance, I appreciate your concern, but psychiatric protocol is clear. We don't negotiate with volatile patients, and we certainly don't send unarmed staff into active threat situations." The dog barked once, a sound like a gunshot. Down the hall, something shattered. Zara's jaw tightened. "That protocol's about to get someone killed." "Your opinion is noted." Hayward turned to security. "Prepare the sedative. If the animal attacks, you're authorized to—" "No." The word came out flat. "Final." Silence dropped like a stone. Hayward's face flushed. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Zara was already moving toward room 447. "You want to help him? You let me do my job." "Your job is to follow orders, Nurse Vance, not to—" She didn't wait for him to finish. She just kept walking, straight toward the dog that hadn't let anyone within 10 feet for almost half an hour. Behind her, someone whispered, "She's going to get herself killed." But Zara Vance had walked into worse. They just didn't know it yet. So that's how this story begins, with a woman no one took seriously, about to do something that should be impossible. Stay with me until the end to see how this plays out. Like this video, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all started. 3 hours earlier, the hospital had been almost peaceful. Zara moved through the psychiatric wing like she always did, efficiently, quietly, barely noticed. She checked vitals on the patients in the secure ward, updated charts, dispensed medication through the safety slots in the reinforced doors. Room 441. Paranoid schizophrenia, stable tonight. Room 443. Bipolar disorder, manic episode controlled. Room 445. Severe PTSD, sedated after an earlier incident. Room 447. Empty, scheduled for a new admission. Vance. The charge nurse, Patricia Moreno, barely glanced up from her computer. "We've got an incoming. ETA, 20 minutes. Combat veteran, acute PTSD episode. Police brought him in after he barricaded himself in his apartment. Took crisis negotiators 4 hours to talk him down. Weapons? No, but he's got a dog, apparently refused to come without it." Patricia's tone suggested this was someone else's problem. "Animal control's supposed to handle it, but they're running late. Can you prep 447? Zara nodded, already running through the intake protocol in her head. Veteran with PTSD meant probable hypervigilance, possible sleep disturbance, definite trust issues. The dog complicated things. Service animals were allowed, but if the patient was actively psychotic, the animal could become a liability. She was halfway through prepping the room when she heard it, tires screeching in the ambulance bay, voices raised, someone shouting, "Get back! Get back!" Then barking. Deep, aggressive, the kind that raised hair on the back of your neck. Zara grabbed her tablet and headed for the intake area. The scene that greeted her looked like barely controlled chaos. Two paramedics flanked a stretcher where a man sat rigid, his hands clenched white-knuckled on the rails. Mid-30s, maybe. Athletic build gone slightly soft, the way soldiers got when they'd been out for a while. His eyes swept the corridor in rapid, jerking movements, threat assessment constant and compulsive. But it was the dog that held everyone's attention. The animal was massive, some kind of shepherd mix, probably 90 pounds of pure muscle. It stood between the stretcher and everyone else, head low, every line of its body screaming, "Don't." "We need to get him inside," one of the paramedics said, sweat beading on his forehead. "But every time we try to move, the dog—" "So don't move." Zara kept her voice level, her body language neutral. She'd seen this before. Different continent, different circumstances, but the same bone-deep loyalty. "He's protecting his handler. You crowd them. You're a threat." Dr. Hayward appeared from the elevator, tablet in hand, expression already annoyed. He was young for a department head, early 40s, with the kind of polished competence that came from Ivy League credentials and zero field experience. Good at committee meetings, less good at actual patients. "What's the holdup?" He glanced at the scene, made a dismissive sound. "Someone call animal control. We can't have an aggressive animal in a psychiatric facility." "He's not aggressive," Zara said. He's doing his job." Hayward's eyes flicked to her, dismissive. "Your assessment wasn't requested, Ms. Vance. This is a medical situation requiring someone who understands what they're looking at." She nodded toward the veteran. "That man's in crisis. His dog's the only stable point in his world right now. You separate them, you lose any chance of cooperation. We sedate him, and he wakes up without his dog and thinks he's been captured. You've just turned a psychiatric intake into a combat scenario." Hayward's jaw tightened. "I'm going to assume you're simply enthusiastic about patient care and not actively questioning my professional judgment." "I'm questioning sending a patient into flashback because protocol doesn't account for service animals." "The animal," Hayward said, his voice sharp now, "is a liability. It stays outside. That's not negotiable." On the stretcher, the veteran's breathing was getting faster. Shallow. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare that meant he wasn't seeing a hospital corridor anymore. He was seeing something else, somewhere else. The dog's growl deepened. "You've got about 60 seconds before he decompensates completely," Zara said quietly. "Let me talk to him." "You are a nurse, Ms. Vance, not a psychiatrist, not a crisis negotiator, not someone who knows what she's looking at." Zara was already moving, slowly, hands visible, body angled non-threateningly. She stopped just outside the dog's threat radius. "Sir, can you hear me?" The veteran's eyes snapped to her. For a second, she saw him trying to focus, trying to come back. "My name's Zara. You're at Cascade Regional Medical Center in Seattle. You're safe. Do you know where you are?" His mouth moved. No sound came out. "That's okay. You don't have to talk yet. I just need you to know you're safe. Your partner there." She nodded to the dog. "He knows it too. But he needs to hear you say it's okay. Can you do that?" The man's hand moved, trembling, to rest on the dog's head. "Chief?" The dog's ears swiveled toward his voice, but the animal didn't move, still on guard. "Good," Zara said softly. "Chief's a good name. Military working dog?" A jerky nod. "He looks like he takes his job seriously. Bet you trained together." Another nod. The veteran's breathing was slowing slightly. Hayward stepped forward. "We appreciate your cooperation, sir, but hospital policy requires—" The dog's bark exploded through the corridor, sharp and vicious. The veteran flinched, his whole body going rigid, his eyes glazed over. "Contact front!" The shout tore out of him, raw and desperate. "RPG! RPG! Taking fire!" He was gone, back in whatever hell his brain had dragged him to. And Hayward had just made it infinitely worse. "Sedate him," Hayward snapped to the paramedics. "Now! No!" Zara lunged forward, but security was already moving, trying to restrain the veteran, and Chief went from guarding to attacking in half a heartbeat, teeth bared, a sound like murder coming from his throat. Someone screamed. The stretcher toppled. The veteran hit the ground and started crawling, still screaming coordinates, still calling for backup that would never come. And Chief planted himself over his handler's body and dared anyone to try. Tranquilize the animal, Hayward ordered. You do that? Someone's getting bit, Zara said, her voice cutting through the chaos. He's in protection mode now. You don't have a clean shot, and if you miss, then what do you suggest? Hayward's face was red now, angry. We let a violent animal run loose in a hospital? I suggest we give the veteran space, lower the threat level, and let him stabilize naturally instead of following actual medical protocol? Instead of listening to someone with an MD instead of a nursing degree? Hayward's voice dripped condescension. I appreciate that you feel strongly about this, Ms. Vance, but feelings don't trump medical expertise. Zara's hands clenched. Every instinct in her body screamed to push back, to make him listen, But she'd learned a long time ago. People like Hayward didn't listen to people like her, so she stepped back, watched as security formed a perimeter, watched as the tranquilizer guns came out, watched as the veteran screamed himself hoarse in the middle of a hospital floor, reliving a war that had ended almost a decade ago. They managed to get him into room 447 eventually. It took 4 security guards, 2 sedatives, and a makeshift barrier to separate Chief from his handler. The dog fought every step, snarling and snapping, until they finally locked him in an empty office down the hall. The veteran never stopped screaming. By the time they had him restrained to the bed, Zara's shift was technically over. She should have gone home. Should have clocked out, gone back to her small apartment, tried to sleep. Instead, she stood outside room 447, listening to a man beg for help that wouldn't come. Patricia found her there 20 minutes later. You're still here? He's still in crisis. Hayward sedated him. He'll sleep it off. He won't. Zara's voice was flat. He'll wake up restrained, disoriented, and convinced he's been captured. Then we'll sedate him again, and again, until his brain decides the threat's permanent. Patricia sighed. Look, I get it. You care. But Hayward's the doctor. He makes the calls. Even when they're wrong? Especially then. Patricia's tone wasn't unkind, just tired. You know how this works, Zara. You're good at your job. Really good. But you don't have the credentials to override an MD, and trying to just makes you look… Like what? Patricia hesitated. Difficult. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Zara had heard it before. Different jobs, different cities, same word. Difficult. Translation: someone who didn't know their place. Someone who asked questions. Someone who saw problems and couldn't let them go. Someone who'd learned the hard way that being right didn't matter if you were the wrong person saying it. Go home, Patricia said gently. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another shift. But Zara stayed. Stayed through the sedative cycles, through the restraint checks, through the night. Stayed because someone had to witness what was happening, even if no one would listen. Around 2 a.m., Dr. Hayward made his rounds. He glanced at her, his expression somewhere between irritation and pity. You're not scheduled. I know. Then why are you here? Someone should be. He shook his head slowly. You know, Ms. Vance, there's a reason we have hierarchies in medicine. It's not about ego. It's about expertise, training, years of education that give people like me the knowledge to make difficult decisions that people like you simply aren't equipped to make. Zara looked at him, really looked. Saw a man who'd probably aced every test, impressed every professor, climbed every ladder. A man who'd never missed a meal, never slept in a desert, never held someone's hand while they bled out waiting for a medevac that took too long. A man who thought credentials were the same as understanding. You're right, she said quietly. I'm just a nurse. Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, at her finally understanding her place. He had no idea what she actually meant. By 3 a.m., the situation had deteriorated. The veteran, his chart said his name was James Kowalski, though Zara thought of him as the man whose dog wouldn't leave him, had woken twice from sedation in full combat mode. Each time, they'd increased the dosage. Each time, he'd fought harder. Down the hall, Chief howled. The sound was raw, desperate. The sound of an animal who knew his partner was in trouble and couldn't reach him. Can we shut that dog up? One of the security guards muttered. He's stressed, Zara said. Separation from handler, unfamiliar environment. It's making the other patients anxious. So is pumping a PTSD patient full of sedatives instead of actually treating him. The guard gave her a look. You want to tell Hayward how to do his job? Someone should. But she didn't. Because she'd learned. Learned that speaking up got you labeled. Got you written up. Got you pushed out. She'd already lost too many jobs by being right at the wrong time. So she did what she always did. Kept her head down, documented everything, and waited for someone with the right credentials to figure out what she already knew. Except this time, there wasn't time to wait. At 3:47 a.m., James Kowalski stopped screaming. That should have been good news. It wasn't. Zara saw it on the monitors first, his vitals dropping, his respiration shallow, his heart rate erratic. Not sedation, shut down, the kind that happened when the brain decided the threat was too much and just stopped fighting. He's decompensating, she said to the tech monitoring the station. His vitals are stable. They're not. Look at the pattern. Dr. Hayward reviewed them an hour ago. Patients responding to treatment. Patients giving up. But the tech had already turned away, and Zara was already talking to no one. She pulled up James's chart. Pre-admission notes from the crisis team. Multiple deployments, honorable discharge, chronic PTSD, managed with therapy and medication until 3 weeks ago when his therapist retired and the VA couldn't place him with anyone new. Stopped taking his meds. Started isolating. Until yesterday, when his landlord heard him shouting and called the police, thinking there was a break-in. There wasn't. Just a man fighting a war that had never left his head. The chart also noted, service dog, name chief. Veteran refuses separation. Recommend accommodation under ADA. Hayward had written in the margin, animal presented aggressive behavior. Separated for safety. Will reevaluate after stabilization. Zara closed the chart. Her hands were shaking. She'd seen this before. Different war, different name, but the same slow spiral. The same well-meaning authorities making the same predictable mistakes, convinced that their credentials meant they understood. They didn't. At 4:15 a.m., the alarm started. Room 447, cardiac distress. Zara ran, crashed through the door to find James convulsing, his body fighting the restraints, foam at his lips. Not a seizure, worse. Panic attack so severe his body was shutting down, heart hammering itself to death trying to escape a threat that didn't exist. Get Hayward, someone shouted. But Zara was already moving, already running the code, already doing compressions while someone else prepped the crash cart. The familiar rhythm took over. Push, push, breathe, push, push, breathe. The mechanical motion that kept bodies alive when everything else failed. Except this time it wasn't working. He's not responding. Increase the AP. BP's dropping. We're losing him. The monitor screamed. James's body jerked once, twice, then went horribly still. And down the hall, Chief started howling. Not the angry bark from before. Something worse. Something that sounded like grief. The dog knew. Hayward burst through the door, scrubs half on, face flushed. What happened? Full arrest, the tech gasped. We've been coding for 6 minutes. Continue compressions. Someone get... Hayward's eyes landed on Zara, still doing chest compressions with mechanical precision. Vance? What are you even... Never mind. Someone relieve her. A resident took over. Zara stepped back, her hands numb, her scrubs soaked with sweat. They worked for another 8 minutes. Pumped him full of drugs, shocked him twice, tried everything. Nothing worked. At 4:31 a.m., Dr. Marcus Hayward called time of death. The room went quiet except for the flatline tone of the monitor. Someone reached over and turned it off. James Kowalski had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, survived firefights and IEDs, and the kind of combat that left scars you couldn't see, and died in a hospital because no one would listen. Hayward pulled off his gloves slowly. His face was pale. Someone notify next of kin. He doesn't have any, Patricia said quietly, reading from the chart. Divorced, no kids, parents deceased. Then notify, I don't know, the VA? Already on it. Hayward turned to leave, then paused, looked back at Zara. You were off shift. I know. So why were you here? Because someone needed to be. His jaw tightened. Did you Did you see any indication this would happen? Every instinct in her screamed to unload, to tell him exactly what she'd seen, what she'd warned him about, what he'd ignored because it came from someone without the right letters after her name. But she was so tired of being the person who was right too late. No, she lied. It was unexpected. Relief flickered across his face. Good. I mean, not good, but we followed protocol, did everything by the book. Sometimes patients just decompensate, despite our best efforts. He actually believed it. Believed that he'd done everything right, that this was just bad luck, just one of those things that happened. Zara felt something cold settle in her chest. Sure, she said. Just one of those things. Hayward left. The team dispersed. Someone would handle the body. Someone else would do the paperwork. And by tomorrow, this would be just another chart, another statistic, another sad story about a veteran who couldn't adjust. And nobody would remember that it didn't have to be this way. Zara walked down the hall toward the office where they'd locked Chief. The howling had stopped. Now there was just silence, somehow worse. She opened the door carefully. The dog sat in the center of the room, perfectly still, not aggressive anymore, not guarding, just waiting. His eyes tracked her movement, and Zara saw something in that gaze that made her chest ache. He knew his handler wasn't coming back. I'm sorry, she whispered. Chief's tail didn't move. He just watched her, and in that moment, Zara felt the weight of every fight she'd lost, every time she'd been right and hadn't mattered, every patient she couldn't save because someone with better credentials thought they knew better. She'd been working in hospitals for 20 years. Different cities, different positions. Always the night shift, always the background. The reliable one. The competent one. The one who never caused problems. The invisible one. And she was so goddamn tired of being invisible while people died. She reached for her phone, pulled up her contacts, found the number she'd hoped she'd never have to use. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. Mom, it's 4:30 in the morning. What? I need you to make a call, Zara said. On the other end, her daughter, Captain Maya Vance, U.S. Army Medical Corps, went very quiet. What happened? Someone died. Someone who shouldn't have. Mom, I tried to stop it, but nobody listens to nurses. Zara's voice cracked. Nobody listens to me. A pause. Then, carefully, what do you need? I need someone to listen, just once. I need someone with the right credentials and the right rank to make these people understand that what happened tonight was preventable, avoidable, and criminal. Mom, you know I can't just... I'm not asking you to pull strings. I'm asking you to make a call. One call. To someone who'll actually investigate instead of sweeping this under unfortunate circumstances. Another pause, longer this time. Maya knew what this meant, knew what her mother was risking. You could lose your job. I know. They'll make it ugly. I know. Mom, are you sure? Zara looked at Chief, at the dog who'd tried so hard to protect his partner and failed because the people who were supposed to help had gotten in the way. I'm sure. Okay. Maya's voice changed, became crisper, professional. Give me the details. Zara told her everything, the intake, the separation, the sedation cycles. Hayward's refusal to listen, the protocols that made things worse, the warnings that were ignored, the preventable death of James Kowalski. When she finished, Maya was quiet for a long moment. This is going to get messy, she said finally. Good. I'll make the call. But Mom, once this starts, you can't stop it. You understand that? I understand. And you're okay with that? Zara thought about 20 years of keeping her head down. 20 years of watching people make mistakes she could have prevented if only she'd been someone they'd listened to. 20 years of being invisible while people suffered. I'm done being okay with things, she said. After Maya hung up, Zara sat with Chief for a while. The dog eventually moved closer, rested his head on her knee, a gesture of trust, or maybe just exhaustion. It's going to be okay, she told him, though she wasn't sure if she was lying. Someone's going to listen now. Chief's eyes closed. Outside, dawn was starting to break over Seattle. In a few hours, the day shift would arrive. Hayward would brief them on the unfortunate loss of a patient. The machinery of the hospital would grind on, processing patients and paperwork with the same impersonal efficiency. Business as usual. Except Zara Vance had just made a call that would blow that machinery apart. She just didn't know it yet. At 6 a.m., she finally went home, showered, changed, tried to sleep but couldn't because her brain kept replaying James's face, Chief's howl, Hayward's dismissive tone. People like you aren't equipped to make these decisions. She'd heard variations of that her whole career, from doctors, administrators, even other nurses who'd bought into the hierarchy. The unspoken message, know your place. And she had. For 20 years, she'd known her place. But knowing your place didn't mean you had to stay there. Her phone buzzed. Maya. Call made. Expect contact within 48 hours. Zara stared at the message, felt something uncurl in her chest. Part fear, part relief, part something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. She slept for 3 hours, woke to her alarm, got ready for another shift. But when she walked into Cascade Regional that evening, something was different. She felt it immediately. The way people's eyes slid past her, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Patricia pulled her aside before she could even clock in. Hayward wants to see you. About? Patricia's expression was carefully neutral. He didn't say. But Zara, whatever this is about, be careful. Hayward's office was on the 4th floor, all glass and chrome and carefully curated success. He sat behind his desk, looking simultaneously annoyed and uncomfortable. Ms. Vance, sit. She sat. There's been a development. He tapped his tablet, not quite meeting her eyes. Apparently someone filed a formal complaint about Mr. Kowalski's treatment, an external complaint routed through military channels. Zara kept her face neutral. That's unusual. It's highly irregular. And since you were present for the majority of the incident, I need to ask, did you speak to anyone about this case outside the hospital? I'm not sure I understand the question. It's simple. Did you discuss this case with anyone outside your normal chain of command? I discussed it with my supervisor, as required, and documented everything in my shift notes, also as required. Hayward's jaw tightened. That's not what I'm asking. Then maybe you should ask what you actually mean. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Fine. Hayward leaned forward. Did you, in any capacity, contact military personnel or veterans advocacy groups regarding James Kowalski's treatment? I'm not obligated to answer that. You absolutely are. Hospital policy requires me to report patient safety concerns through appropriate channels, which I did. External channels are not appropriate. Actually, they are. When a veteran patient dies under circumstances that warrant investigation, notifying the appropriate military and Veterans Affairs authorities is not only appropriate, it's mandatory. Hayward's face went red. You had no right. I had every right. And more importantly, I had an obligation. Zara stood. Is there anything else? Sit. Down. The words came out clipped, angry. You have no idea what you've done. I reported a preventable death. You violated patient privacy, chain of command, and basic professional courtesy because you, disagreed with my clinical judgment? I reported that a patient died because his treatment plan ignored documented best practices for PTSD management, dismissed evidence-based protocols for service animal accommodation, and prioritized institutional convenience over patient welfare. That's your opinion? It's medical fact, and it's all documented in my notes, which I'm sure the investigators will find very interesting. Hayward stood too, his hands flat on the desk. You're done here, effective immediately. I'm suspending you pending a full review of your conduct. On what grounds? Insubordination, breach of protocol, conduct unbecoming. Of someone who actually gives a damn about patient care? Of someone who thinks 20 years of nursing makes them smarter than a board-certified psychiatrist with zero combat trauma experience, zero service animal training, and apparently zero interest in listening to staff who might know something he doesn't. The silence that followed was nuclear. Hayward's voice, when he finally spoke, was very quiet, very controlled. Clean out your locker. Security will escort you out. You're not to have any contact with patients, staff, or hospital property pending the outcome of the investigation. Understood. Ms. Vance? His smile was thin, sharp. I hope whatever point you were trying to make was worth your career. Because you're finished in this city, possibly this state. I'll make sure every hospital administrator from here to San Francisco knows exactly what kind of liability you represent. Zara met his eyes, saw the threat, recognized it, didn't flinch. If that's true, she said quietly, then every hospital administrator from here to San Francisco will know that you'd rather destroy a nurse's career than admit you made a mistake that killed a patient. Get out. She did. The walk to her locker felt surreal. A few people watched her go, some with pity, some with barely concealed satisfaction. Patricia caught up with her in the locker room. Zara, Jesus, what did you do? My job. Your job was to keep your head down and watch people die because doctors with God complexes can't admit they're wrong? Zara pulled out her few personal items, stuffed them in her bag. I'm done with that. You're done with everything now. You know that, right? Hayward's connected. He'll blackball you everywhere. Maybe. Definitely. Patricia's voice softened. I get it. I do. But there are ways to fight the system without destroying yourself. Name one, Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't, because there wasn't one. Not really. Not for people like them. The system protected itself. Always had. Always would. Unless someone burned it down. Zara zipped her bag. Thanks for the concern, Patricia, really, but I'm okay. You don't look okay. I'm better than okay. And the strange thing was, she meant it. For the first time in 20 years, she'd done the right thing instead of the safe thing. I can actually sleep tonight. Security escorted her out through the loading dock, the back way, where patients and visitors wouldn't see the spectacle of a fired employee. The morning air was cold, and Zara stood in the parking lot for a moment, her bag over her shoulder, her career in ruins. She should have felt devastated. Instead, she felt free. Her phone buzzed. Maya. Heard you got suspended. You okay? Zara typed back. Better than I've been in years. That's my mom. Call coming in from the investigating officer tomorrow. Be ready. I'm ready. She drove home through morning traffic, past the coffee shops and office buildings full of people heading to jobs where they'd keep their heads down, follow orders, and never make waves. Safe people. Smart people. Invisible people. Zara had been one of them for 2 decades. Not anymore. When she got home, there was an email waiting from an address she didn't recognize, subject line, Kowalski Investigation. Her finger hovered over it for a long moment. Then she opened it. Ms. Vance, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Reeves, U.S. Army Medical Corps. I've been assigned to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of James Kowalski. Your daughter spoke highly of your professionalism and dedication. I'd like to schedule a formal interview at your earliest convenience. Please be advised that this is a preliminary investigation and may expand depending on findings. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required. However, given your first-hand knowledge of the events in question, your testimony could be vital to determining whether Mr. Kowalski's death constitutes negligence, malpractice, or criminal conduct. Please respond within 24 hours to schedule. Below the signature was a phone number and an office address. Zara read it twice, then a third time. Criminal conduct. Hayward had threatened to destroy her career. He treated her like an annoyance, a problem to be managed, a subordinate who'd forgotten her place. He had no idea what was about to hit him. She typed a response. Available immediately. We'll call to schedule. Then she sat back, looked around her small apartment, the place she'd landed after the last job that hadn't worked out, in the last city that hadn't appreciated her, in the latest chapter of a career spent being invisible. And she smiled. Not because she was happy, not because this was going to be easy, but because for the first time in 20 years, someone was actually going to listen, and that was going to change everything. The interview was scheduled for Tuesday morning at a federal building downtown, the kind of place with metal detectors and bored security guards who'd seen everything twice. Zara arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the only blazer she owned, navy blue, slightly worn at the cuffs, bought for a job interview 6 years ago that hadn't panned out. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Reeves didn't look like what Zara expected. Mid-40s, maybe, with graying hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun and the kind of direct gaze that came from years of cutting through bullshit. She shook Zara's hand with a grip that meant business. Ms. Vance, thank you for coming. Call me Zara. Zara. Reeves gestured to a chair in the small conference room. This won't take long. I just need your account of what happened with James Kowalski from intake to the end. Zara sat. You want the sanitized version or the truth? I don't do sanitized. So Zara told her. Everything. The intake chaos, Hayward's dismissal of her concerns, the forced separation of Chief from his handler, the sedation cycles that made things worse instead of better, the warning she'd given that no one had listened to, the death that didn't have to happen. Reeves took notes on a tablet, her expression unreadable. When Zara finished, the room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. You documented all of this? Reeves asked finally. Every shift note, every observation. All in the system. And Dr. Hayward's response when you raised concerns? He told me to stay in my lane, said people like me weren't equipped to make medical decisions. Something flickered in Reeves's eyes. People like you. Nurses. People without the right credentials. Zara's voice stayed level. People he didn't have to listen to. Reeves set down her tablet. I've read your file, Zara. Your entire file. Not just your nursing record. The air in the room changed. I don't know what you mean, Zara said carefully. I think you do. Reeves leaned back. Navy Special Warfare. Combat medic attached to SEAL team operations. 3 deployments. Commendations for actions under fire. Expert certification in K-9 casualty care and combat trauma management. Then nothing. You separated from the service 20 years ago and became a floor nurse. Zara's jaw tightened. That file's supposed to be sealed. It is, for most people. Reeves's tone wasn't unkind. But when a veteran dies under suspicious circumstances, and the only person who tried to stop it happens to have specialized training in exactly the scenario that killed him, I pull strings. Why? Because I want to know why someone with your background spent 20 years emptying bedpans instead of training trauma teams. Reeves waited. So I'm asking, why'd you bury yourself? The question landed like a punch. Zara looked away, out the window at the gray Seattle skyline. She'd spent 2 decades making sure no one asked this question. 2 decades being forgettable, unremarkable. Just another nurse on just another shift. Same reason most of us bury ourselves, she said finally. Because the war doesn't end when you come home. It just gets quieter. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Reeves studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled up something on her tablet, turned it so Zara could see. A photo. Young woman in military fatigues standing next to a massive German shepherd, both of them looking straight at the camera with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what they were capable of. Zara's breath caught. She hadn't seen that photo in 20 years. That's Sergeant Zara Vance, Reeves said quietly, age 24, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. You and your K-9 partner, Atlas. According to the citation, you spent 16 hours under enemy fire keeping 3 critically wounded SEALs alive until extraction arrived. Atlas took shrapnel protecting one of them. You performed field surgery on a dog with one hand while doing chest compressions on a sailor with the other. Stop. All 3 sailors survived. Atlas survived. You were recommended for a Silver Star. I said stop. Reeves closed the tablet. Why didn't you accept it? Because 2 other people died that day. Zara's voice came out rough. 2 people I couldn't save. So no, I didn't want a medal for being good at choosing who lived. The silence stretched. Atlas? Reeves asked softly. Retired with me. Lived another 12 years. Died in his sleep. Zara's hands clenched. And before you ask, no, I haven't worked with a dog since. Haven't deployed since. Haven't been that person since. I got out, got my nursing degree, and spent 20 years being as unremarkable as possible. Until James Kowalski. Until I watched someone die the same way I watched people die in Afghanistan. Badly. Preventably. Because the person in charge cared more about being right than being useful. Reeves nodded slowly, like something had just clicked into place. Hayward has no idea who he's dealing with, does he? No one does. That was kind of the point. Well, Reeves picked up her tablet again. That's about to change. Based on your testimony and the medical records, I'm recommending a full investigation into James Kowalski's death. Criminal negligence at minimum, possibly manslaughter. The VA is also filing a civil complaint regarding improper treatment of a service-connected veteran. Zara felt something loosen in her chest. Good. But I need you to understand what comes next. This gets ugly. Hayward's going to fight back. The hospital's going to circle the wagons. Your credibility will be attacked, your record questioned, your motives dissected. They'll paint you as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. Let them. They'll destroy your nursing career, permanently. They already did that. Zara met Reeves' eyes. I've got nothing left to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Not me. Not anymore. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, extended her hand again. Your daughter was right about you. You're exactly the kind of stubborn that gets things done. Maya said that. Among other things, she's protective. Mentioned if I wasted your time or didn't take this seriously, she'd make my life difficult. Despite everything, Zara almost smiled. That sounds like her. Apple didn't fall far. Reeves walked her to the door. I'll be in touch. And Zara, whatever happens next, don't back down. People like Hayward count on people like you being too tired to fight. Prove him wrong. Zara left the federal building feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The investigation was real. Someone was listening. Someone with the authority to actually do something was taking this seriously. It wouldn't bring James Kowalski back, but it might prevent the next one. She was halfway to her car when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Vance? This is Jennifer Torres from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about the death of James Kowalski at Cascade Regional Medical Center. Do you have any comment? Zara's stomach dropped. How did you get this number? Public records. Look, I know you filed a complaint with military authorities. I also know the hospital suspended you. I'd like to hear your side of the story. No comment. Ms. Vance, if there was negligence involved, I said no comment. Zara hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. This time she didn't answer. By the time she got home, she had 11 missed calls from various news outlets and a voicemail from someone claiming to be a veterans advocacy lawyer. Her email inbox had tripled. Social media, which she barely used, was blowing up with friend requests and messages from people she'd never met. The story had leaked. She called Maya. I know, her daughter said before Zara could even speak. It's everywhere. Local news picked it up an hour ago. National outlets are circling. Mom, this is going to get intense. I didn't talk to anyone. Doesn't matter. Someone at the VA or the federal building leaked the investigation. Now it's public. Maya paused. Are you okay? I don't know yet. Do you have somewhere you can go, stay low for a few days? I'm not hiding. Mom, I spent 20 years hiding, Maya. I'm done. Her daughter sighed. Stubborn. You get it from me. Unfortunately. But there was warmth in Maya's voice. Pride, maybe. Okay, don't talk to the press without a lawyer. Don't engage on social media. And Mom, document everything, every call, every email, every threat. Threat? You just became the face of a story about military veterans getting screwed by the healthcare system. Some people are going to love you, some are going to hate you. Both groups are going to be loud. Maya wasn't wrong. By evening, Zara's name was trending on Twitter. Half the posts called her a hero for standing up to medical malpractice. The other half called her an attention-seeking troublemaker trying to blame doctors for a tragic but unavoidable death. Someone had found an old photo of her in uniform and posted it with the caption, "This is the nurse who tried to save James Kowalski. This is who the hospital fired for caring too much." Another account posted, Zara Vance violated patient privacy and protocol because she thinks 20 years of holding bedpans makes her smarter than actual doctors. She should lose her license. The comment sections were war zones. Zara read them for about 10 minutes before closing her laptop. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't built for this. Wasn't built for public scrutiny, for strangers dissecting her decisions, for her face and name attached to headlines. She'd spent her entire adult life being invisible specifically to avoid this. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. Patricia. Don't hang up, Patricia said immediately. I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone at the hospital right now, but you need to know Hayward's lawyering up, big firm, the kind that specializes in destroying whistleblowers. They're already building a case that you acted out of personal vendetta, that you had a history of insubordination. I don't. They're creating one, pulling every write-up, every disagreement, every time you questioned a doctor's orders. They're going to paint you as someone with an authority problem who couldn't handle being told no. Zara's grip on the phone tightened. Let them try. Zara, listen to me. They're good, really good. They're going to dig into your past, find anything they can use. And if they find out about your military service, they will. Then you need to be ready, because they'll spin it, make you look unstable, PTSD, anger issues, someone who couldn't cut it in the military and took it out on a doctor who was just trying to help. That's garbage. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if it sounds believable. Patricia's voice softened. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. This isn't about right and wrong anymore. It's about who tells the better story. After Patricia hung up, Zara sat in her dark apartment and let that sink in. She thought this was about justice, about holding people accountable, about making sure James Kowalski's death meant something. But Patricia was right. This was about narrative now, about spin, about lawyers and PR firms and who could control the story. And Zara had no idea how to fight that kind of war. The next morning, Cascade Regional Medical Center released a statement. We are deeply saddened by the loss of James Kowalski and extend our heartfelt condolences to his family and friends. Mr. Kowalski received compassionate, professional care in accordance with established psychiatric protocols. While we cannot comment on personnel matters, we can confirm that all staff members involved followed appropriate medical procedures. The allegations of negligence are unfounded and appear to stem from a former employee's misunderstanding of complex psychiatric treatment protocols. We are cooperating fully with all investigations and are confident that a thorough review will demonstrate that our team acted with the utmost professionalism and care. It was a masterpiece of deflection. Compassionate language, vague enough to avoid specifics, just enough detail to make Zara sound like she didn't know what she was talking about. Misunderstanding of complex protocols. Translation: she's just a nurse, she doesn't understand. The media picked it up immediately. Headlines shifted. Hospital denies wrongdoing in veteran's death. Psychiatric treatment under scrutiny. After former nurse's complaint. Did Zara Vance overstep? Experts wait. In. That last one featured an interview with a psychiatrist from a different hospital who'd never met James Kowalski, never reviewed his chart, but had plenty to say about how service dogs could indeed pose safety risks, and how sometimes sedation was necessary despite a patient's objections. The expert concluded, without knowing the specific details, it sounds like the medical team made reasonable decisions under difficult circumstances. Unfortunately, tragic outcomes can occur even with appropriate care. Zara wanted to throw her laptop across the room. Instead, she called Reeves. I saw the statement, Reeves said. Ignore it. They're making me sound incompetent. They're scared, that's good. Doesn't feel good. It will. Reeves paused. I've got an update. The VA completed their preliminary review. They're filing formal charges. Criminal negligence resulting in death. The case goes to a grand jury next month. Zara's breath caught. Criminal charges. Against Dr. Marcus Hayward specifically, and possibly against the hospital administration for inadequate oversight. This is real now, Zara. This is happening. What do they need from me? Your testimony. Full deposition, probably a court appearance. Can you handle that? Yes. It won't be pleasant. Hayward's lawyers will come at you hard. They'll question everything. Your credentials, your judgment, your motives. They'll try to rattle you. I've been shot at. I think I can handle some lawyers. Reeves laughed, short and sharp. I like you. Okay. My office will be in touch to schedule the deposition. And Zara, you might want to get your own lawyer, not because you're in trouble, but because you're about to be in the middle of a very expensive legal fight. I can't afford a lawyer. Veterans advocacy groups are lining up to help. I'll send you some contacts. Use them. After the call ended, Zara sat with the news. Criminal charges against Hayward, against the hospital, because she'd refused to stay quiet. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt terrified. This was real. This was actually happening. And once it started, there was no going back. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "You're making a mistake. Drop this before you get hurt." Then another. "People like you don't win against people like us. Ask yourself if this is really worth destroying your life over." Then another. "I know where you live." Zara stared at the messages. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd gone numb. She screenshotted everything, forwarded it to Reeves with a simple message: "Getting threats." Reeves responded immediately. "File a police report, now. And Zara, be careful." The police were professional but not particularly concerned. Lots of people got angry messages online, they explained. Unless there was a specific credible threat of violence, there wasn't much they could do. They took the report, gave her a case number, told her to call if anything escalated. Zara left the station feeling more alone than she had in years. That night, she couldn't sleep. Kept checking the locks on her doors, jumping at sounds that were probably just the building settling. At 2 a.m., she gave up and made coffee, sat at her kitchen table scrolling through news articles about the case. Most of them were variations on the same theme: nurse versus doctor, protocol versus compassion, tragic death versus acceptable medical risk. Everyone had an opinion. No one had been there. She found one article that was different, smaller outlet, independent journalist. The headline read, "The Invisible Veteran: How Zara Vance's Military Past Explains Her Fight for James Kowalski." Someone had done their homework. The article detailed her service record, carefully avoiding classified details, but hitting the major points. Combat medic, K-9 specialist, multiple deployments, commendations. Then it drew a line straight to James Kowalski, another veteran, another person the system had failed. Vance knows what it's like to fight for people who can't fight for themselves, the article concluded. She did it in Afghanistan. She tried to do it at Cascade Regional. The question now is whether the system she's challenging will let her succeed or destroy her for trying. It was the first piece that treated her like a person instead of a symbol. Zara bookmarked it. The deposition was scheduled for the following week. 3 days before, she met with the lawyer the veterans group had connected her with, a woman named Rebecca Okonkwo, who'd built her career on medical malpractice cases and had a reputation for not backing down. "They're going to try to break you," Rebecca said, sitting across from Zara in a cramped office that smelled like old coffee. "They'll imply you're emotional, unstable, vindictive. They'll suggest your military service left you with psychological issues that cloud your judgment. I don't have PTSD. Doesn't matter. They'll plant the seed. Make the jury wonder." Rebecca leaned forward. "Here's what you need to understand. This isn't about the truth. It's about reasonable doubt. All Hayward's team needs is to make you seem unreliable. Then they can dismiss everything you say as the bitter rantings of a disgruntled employee with mental health issues. So what do I do? Stay calm. Stay factual. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. And whatever you do, don't hide your military service. Own it. Make them see it as your strength, not your weakness." "How?" Rebecca smiled. "By reminding everyone in that room that you've been trained to make life or death decisions under pressure. That you've done it successfully, repeatedly, in circumstances far more chaotic than a hospital corridor. That your judgment has been tested in ways theirs never will be." The day of the deposition arrived cold and gray, typical Seattle winter. Zara dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, confident but not aggressive. Rebecca had coached her on body language, tone, how to handle hostile questions. The conference room was smaller than she'd expected. Hayward sat on one side with his legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they billed by the minute. Reeves was there representing the military's interests. Rebecca sat next to Zara. The lead attorney for Hayward's defense was a man named Richard Caldwell, silver-haired and smooth in the way of people who'd spent decades convincing juries that black was white. "Ms. Vance," he began, his tone friendly. "Dangerous. Thank you for being here today. I was subpoenaed." "Of course. Let's start with some background. You've worked as a registered nurse for approximately 20 years, is that correct?" "Yes." "And in that time, you've been employed by how many hospitals?" 7? Caldwell's eyebrows rose. 7 hospitals in 20 years, that's quite a bit of movement. "I relocated several times." "For personal reasons?" "Yes." Not because of employment issues, Rebecca cut in. That's not relevant to... I'll allow it, the court reporter said. This was a deposition, not a trial. The rules were looser. Zara kept her voice steady. I moved for personal reasons, better opportunities, different cities. I see. Caldwell made a note. And at these various positions, did you ever have conflicts with supervising physicians? Sometimes. Can you elaborate? Disagreements about patient care, it happens in healthcare. How often would you say these disagreements occurred? I don't keep count. But it was a pattern. You disagreeing with doctors? Rebecca's hand touched Zara's arm, a warning. Stay calm. I advocated for patients when I felt their care could be improved. That's part of nursing. Or, Caldwell said pleasantly, you have difficulty accepting authority, difficulty trusting that people with more education and training might know better than you do. Objection, Rebecca said, argumentative. I'm simply trying to establish Miss Vance's professional history and whether there's a pattern of behavior that might explain her actions regarding Mr. Kowalski. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Caldwell picked apart every job change, every notation in her personnel files, every time she'd questioned a medical decision. He made it sound like insubordination, made her sound difficult. Then he shifted gears. Ms. Vance, you served in the military, correct? Here it comes, Zara thought. Yes, United States Navy. As a medic? Correct. And you saw combat? Yes. Must have been difficult, traumatic even. It was challenging. Did you receive any psychological counseling after your deployments? Rebecca started to object, but Zara answered. Standard post-deployment screening. Everyone does. But you separated from the service rather suddenly, didn't you, after your 3rd deployment? I completed my contract. You didn't re-enlist, though, despite commendations, despite a successful career. You just left. Caldwell tilted his head. Why? Personal reasons. Were those personal reasons related to combat stress? Post-traumatic stress disorder, perhaps? No. You're certain? Because it would be understandable. The things you saw, the things you experienced. I don't have PTSD, Mr. Caldwell. But you've never been formally evaluated for it since leaving the service? I didn't need to be. So you self-diagnosed, decided on your own that you were fine? Objection, Rebecca said sharply. This is beyond the scope. Your Honor, I'm establishing whether Ms. Vance's judgment regarding psychiatric matters might be compromised by her own unresolved trauma. The court reporter nodded. I'll allow it, but move on soon, Mr. Caldwell. Caldwell smiled. Ms. Vance, isn't it true that your experience in combat, however valiant, might make you particularly sensitive to situations involving veterans? That you might see crisis where trained psychiatric professionals see routine treatment? Zara felt the trap, saw exactly where he was going. If she admitted her military experience influenced her judgment, he'd paint her as biased. If she denied it mattered, he'd question why she thought she knew better than Hayward. She chose a third option. My military experience taught me to recognize when someone's in crisis and needs immediate intervention. It taught me to trust my training and my instincts, especially when lives are at stake. And it taught me that sometimes the person with the most credentials isn't the person who understands the situation best. Caldwell's smile tightened. So you do think you knew better than Dr. Hayward? I think I recognized what James Kowalski needed and Dr. Hayward didn't. Yes. Despite his medical degree, his years of psychiatric training, his board certification, despite all of that. Zara met his eyes. Because credentials don't mean anything if you're not actually listening to the patient. Ms. Vance, James Kowalski was a combat veteran in acute psychological distress. His service dog was his anchor. Separating them triggered a crisis that escalated into cardiac arrest. I told Dr. Hayward that would happen. I told him before it happened. He didn't listen because I'm just a nurse, and he's a doctor, and the hierarchy mattered more than the patient. Caldwell's expression hardened. You're testifying based on emotion, not medical evidence. I'm testifying based on what I saw, what I documented, what I tried to prevent. What you think you saw. what you interpreted through the lens of your own unresolved issues regarding military service and authority. Objection! Rebecca was on her feet. Counselor is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Caldwell, ask questions or we're done here. But Caldwell had made his point. He sat back, satisfied. No further questions at this time. When it was over, Rebecca walked Zara to her car. You did well. He rattled you, but you didn't break. Felt like I broke. You didn't. You stayed factual, you didn't get defensive, and you didn't let him make you cry. Trust me, that's a win. What happens now? They'll use this deposition to try to discredit you before the grand jury. But we've got the medical records on our side. We've got your documentation. And we've got the fact that everything you predicted would happen did happen. Rebecca paused. The truth has a way of winning, eventually. Eventually might be too late. For Kowalski, yes. But not for the next veteran who ends up in that hospital. Not if we win this. Zara drove home in a fog. The deposition had drained her, made her doubt herself in ways she hadn't expected. Maybe Caldwell was right. Maybe her judgment was compromised. Maybe she'd projected her own issues onto Kowalski's situation, seen crisis where there was only standard medical care. Maybe she'd destroyed her career over nothing. She was halfway home when her phone rang. Maya. How'd it go? I don't know. Bad? Good? I can't tell anymore. Did you tell the truth? Yes? Then it went fine. Mom, listen. I'm coming home. What? No, you're deployed. You can't just... I'm on leave, already approved. I'll be there tomorrow. Maya, you stood up for a veteran when no one else would. You think I'm going to let you go through this alone? Maya's voice softened. Besides, there's something you should know about Kowalski. What about him? He saved my life. In Kandahar. 2019. I was attached to a convoy that got hit. He was the one who pulled me out of the vehicle before it exploded. The world tilted. You never told me, Zara whispered. I didn't know it was him until I saw his name in the report. But yeah, same guy, James Kowalski. Maya's voice cracked slightly. So when I say this matters, it's not just about justice, Mom. It's personal. He saved my life. And when he needed someone to save his, you tried. You did everything right. Zara pulled over, her hands shaking too hard to drive. Maya, I'll see you tomorrow. And Mom, we're going to win this, I promise. After Maya hung up, Zara sat in her car on the side of the road and finally let herself cry. Not from fear or frustration or exhaustion. From grief. For James Kowalski, who'd saved her daughter's life and died alone in a hospital because no one would listen. For herself, for 20 years of keeping quiet when she should have spoken up. For every person who'd been invisible when they should have been heard. She cried until she couldn't anymore. Then she wiped her face, started the car, and drove home. Tomorrow, Maya would arrive. Together, they'd fight this. But tonight, Zara allowed herself to feel the weight of what she'd started. The machinery she'd set in motion. The battle she couldn't back down from now, even if she wanted to. She got home to find something taped to her door. An envelope. No postage, no return address. Hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Last warning. Drop the case or we'll make sure everyone knows what really happened in Kandahar. How many people died because you froze. How you got a medal you didn't deserve. How you've been running from the truth ever since. Walk away now or we burn you down. Zara's vision tunneled. Her hands went numb. Someone had dug into her classified service record. Someone knew about the operation that ended her military career. The one she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it hadn't happened. The one that still woke her up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, Atlas's phantom weight against her leg, the only thing that kept her breathing. They knew. And they were willing to use it. Zara's phone was already dialing before she fully processed the threat. Rebecca answered on the second ring. They're threatening to expose my military record, Zara said, her voice surprisingly steady. Classified information, things that shouldn't be public. Send me a photo of the note, now. Zara did, heard Rebecca's sharp intake of breath on the other end. This is felony obstruction, possibly espionage if they actually accessed sealed military files. A pause. Zara, what happened in Kandahar? Something I don't talk about. Well, you're going to have to, because if they leak it first, they control the narrative. If we get ahead of it, we don't. Nobody knows about this except people with clearance levels higher than yours. Then how did they? I don't know. But Zara's mind was already racing. Who had access? Who could dig that deep? But whoever's behind this has serious resources. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Okay, new plan. We report this to the FBI. Tampering with classified records is their jurisdiction. And we accelerate the timeline. Get your testimony locked in before they have time to execute whatever smear campaign they're planning. The grand jury isn't for 3 weeks. Not anymore. I'm calling in favors. We move it up. After Rebecca hung up, Zara stood in her apartment staring at the note. The words blurred, but the message was crystal clear. They were willing to destroy her completely, which meant she was close to something they couldn't afford to have exposed. She called Reeves next, got voicemail, left a message that probably sounded calmer than she felt. Then she sat down at her laptop and did something she'd avoided for 20 years. She pulled up the after-action report from Operation Phantom Reach. The file was heavily redacted, black bars across whole paragraphs, names removed, locations obscured. But the skeleton was there. The mission that had ended her military career, the one she'd spent 2 decades trying to forget. 15 operators inserted into hostile territory. Objective: extract a high-value target providing intelligence on insurgent networks. Intelligence indicating minimal resistance. Intelligence was wrong. They'd walked into an ambush. What was supposed to be a quick extraction turned into a 13-hour siege. Casualties mounted. Communications went down. Extraction delayed because the only landing zone was under sustained fire. Zara had kept 3 critically wounded SEALs alive through that entire nightmare. Field surgery with supplies meant for minor trauma. Improvised everything. Atlas took shrapnel protecting one of them. She'd operated on her own dog with trembling hands while mortars fell close enough to shower them with debris. All 3 SEALs survived. But 2 Marines providing perimeter security didn't. The official report cited them as KYA from enemy fire. Heroic defense of the position, posthumous medals. The unofficial truth was more complicated. One of them, Lance Corporal David Ruiz, 22 years old from Phoenix, had taken a gut shot early in the firefight. Zara had triaged him as expectant. Her supplies were limited, she had 3 other critical patients, and Ruiz's injuries were catastrophic. She'd made the call, focus on the ones she could save. Ruiz had died slowly over the next 6 hours, conscious for most of it, while Zara worked 10 feet away on patients who had better odds. She could still hear him calling for his mother. The second Marine, Corporal Sarah Lindstrom, had been hit during the final push to secure the landing zone. Zara had been doing compressions on one of the SEALs, couldn't break away. By the time she got to Lindstrom, it was too late. The official report said nothing about triage decisions, said nothing about who Zara had chosen to save and who she'd chosen to let die. But someone who'd been there knew. Someone who'd watched her make those calls. And now they were threatening to rewrite the narrative. Turn life-saving triage into negligent abandonment. Turn battlefield medicine into criminal incompetence. Turn her into the person who got Marines killed. Zara closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking again. She'd made the right calls that day. She knew that. Every trauma surgeon, every combat medic, every person who'd ever had to decide who lived and who died under fire knew that. But the families of David Ruiz and Sarah Lindstrom didn't know that. The media wouldn't care about that. And a jury sure as hell wouldn't understand that. Maya arrived the next morning looking like she'd slept on the plane, which she probably had. She took one look at Zara's face and said, "What happened?" Zara handed her the note. Maya read it once, then again, her expression hardening with each word. Kandahar. Yeah. They're bluffing. That file's sealed. No civilian lawyer can access it. Someone did. Then we find out who. Maya pulled out her phone. I've got contacts at NCIS. If someone's leaking classified records, that's a federal crime. They'll investigate. And if they don't find anything before the trial, then we deal with it. Maya's jaw set in a way that reminded Zara of herself at that age. Stubborn, unwilling to back down. But Mom, you need to understand something. What you did that day, those triage calls, that was combat medicine. You saved 3 lives. The fact that you couldn't save everyone doesn't make you responsible for their deaths. Tell that to their families. I will if I have to. Maya sat down across from her. But first, you're going to tell me everything, every detail. Because if they're planning to use this against you, we need to know exactly what ammunition they have. So Zara told her everything she'd buried for 20 years. The ambush, the casualties, the impossible choices, the sounds, the smells, the way Atlas had whimpered when she'd pulled shrapnel from his shoulder with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The way David Ruiz had looked at her when he realized she wasn't coming back to help him. Maya listened without interrupting. When Zara finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You did everything right, she said finally. I let 2 people die. You saved 3 others, under conditions that would have broken most people. Maya leaned forward. Mom, I've done combat medicine. I know what those calls feel like. And I know that second-guessing yourself afterward doesn't change the fact that you made the only decisions you could make with the information and resources you had. Doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to haunt you. That's how you know you're still human. Maya's voice softened. But you don't get to let that guilt stop you from doing what's right now. James Kowalski died because someone prioritized their ego over his life. You're the only person willing to hold them accountable. If you back down now because some lawyer dug up your worst day, then Ruiz and Lindstrom died for nothing, and so did Kowalski. The words hit like a physical blow. Maya was right. Zara had spent 20 years running from Kandahar, running from the guilt, from the memory of choices she couldn't undo. She'd made herself invisible, unremarkable, safe. And in doing so, she'd let people like Hayward operate unchecked, let the system protect itself at the expense of the people it was supposed to serve. James Kowalski had paid the price for her silence. So had how many others? Okay, Zara said. So what do we do? Maya smiled. We go on offense. The strategy session happened in Rebecca's office. Maya had brought a friend, another Army captain named Derek Walsh, who specialized in military law. Between the 4 of them, they built a counter-strategy. They're trying to destroy your credibility before the grand jury, Rebecca said. Classic move. If they can make you look unstable, biased, or incompetent, your testimony becomes worthless. So we flip it, Derek said. Make the Kandahar operation your strength, not your weakness. You're not a nurse with PTSD. You're a decorated combat veteran with specialized trauma training who recognized a crisis that a civilian psychiatrist missed. How do we prove they accessed classified files? Maya asked. We don't have to, Rebecca said. We just have to make enough noise that the people who did access them get scared. FBI investigation into potential espionage? That's not a small thing. Whoever leaked this to Hayward's lawyers will think twice before they leak more. Assuming it was a leak, Zara said, what if they guessed? Took a shot in the dark, hoping I'd panic. Everyone looked at her. I mean, think about it, she continued. They know I served in combat. They know I separated suddenly. They know I've been running from something for 20 years. They don't need the actual files. They just need me to believe they have them. Derek nodded slowly. Psychological warfare. Make the threat vague enough that you fill in the blanks yourself. And I did exactly that. Zara felt something shift in her chest. They played me. Then we play them back, Maya said. We call their bluff. Hold a press conference. You tell your story, the real story, before they can twist it. Control the narrative. No. Rebecca shook her head. That's too risky. Once you go public, you can't walk it back. And if they do have something we don't know about, they don't, Zara said with sudden certainty. If they had real evidence, they'd have used it already. This note was a Hail Mary. They're desperate. Desperate people are dangerous, Rebecca warned. So are people with nothing left to lose. Zara met her eyes. Set up the press conference. It took 2 days to arrange. In that time, the FBI opened an investigation into the classified file leak. Hayward's legal team went silent, and the media coverage intensified. Zara's face was on every local news broadcast, her story dissected by armchair experts who'd never spent a day in uniform. The press conference was scheduled for Friday afternoon at a downtown hotel. Rebecca had reached out to veterans groups, military advocacy organizations, and the journalists who'd been covering the case fairly. The room was packed. Zara stood at the podium wearing the same blazer she'd worn to the deposition. Maya stood beside her in full dress uniform, a deliberate choice. This wasn't just about Zara. This was about every veteran who'd been failed by the system. The camera flashes were blinding. "My name is Zara Vance," she began, her voice steady. 23 years ago, I enlisted in the United States Navy as a hospital corpsman. I was eventually selected for Special Operations medical training and spent the next 7 years attached to Naval Special Warfare Units as a combat medic and K-9 casualty specialist. She paused, letting that sink in. During that time, I deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. I treated everything from minor injuries to catastrophic trauma. I performed field surgery under fire. I kept people alive when the odds said they shouldn't be. Another pause. I also lost people. Because in combat medicine, you don't save everyone. You make choices. Impossible choices. You decide who gets treatment first, who can wait, and who has injuries too severe to survive. Those decisions haunt you. They're supposed to. Her voice didn't waver, didn't break. In 2014, I was involved in an operation that went wrong. We took heavy casualties. I had limited supplies and multiple critical patients. I made triage decisions. I focused on the people I could save, and 2 Marines died while I was working on others. The room was dead silent. That's the truth. Not a rumor. Not an allegation. The truth. And if that makes me unqualified to recognize a medical crisis, then I guess every combat medic in this country is unqualified too. She pulled out a folder, held it up. This is James Kowalski's medical chart. Every note I made is in here, every warning I gave. Every time I told Dr. Marcus Hayward that his treatment plan would cause harm. It's all documented. She set the folder on the podium. Dr. Hayward didn't listen because I'm a nurse, not a doctor, because I don't have the right credentials, because people like me don't get to question people like him. Her hands gripped the podium edge. James Kowalski was a decorated combat veteran who survived 2 tours in Afghanistan. He survived firefights and IEDs and the kind of trauma most people can't imagine. And he died in a hospital because the person treating him cared more about protocol than about actually listening to his patient. Zara's voice rose slightly. So, yes, I filed a complaint. Yes, I'm testifying against Dr. Hayward. And yes, I'm willing to have my entire military record, my entire career, my entire life torn apart if that's what it takes to make sure this doesn't happen to another veteran. She looked directly at the cameras. I spent 20 years trying to be invisible, trying to avoid conflict, trying to keep my head down and just do my job. And while I was being invisible, how many other patients were harmed? How many other families got the call that their loved one died from unfortunate circumstances that were actually preventable mistakes? Her jaw tightened. I'm done being invisible, and I'm done letting people with credentials use those credentials as shields for incompetence. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted over each other. Rebecca stepped forward to manage the chaos, but Zara heard enough to know it had worked. They weren't asking about her mental health anymore. They were asking why Hayward hadn't listened. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the press conference video had gone viral. Veterans groups shared it. Active duty military shared it. Nurses shared it. By evening, Zara's face was on national news, and the story had shifted from disgruntled nurse versus doctor to decorated veteran exposes medical negligence. Hayward's legal team released a statement calling the press conference a publicity stunt designed to influence the grand jury. They reiterated that all treatment protocols had been followed and that Zara's emotional testimony didn't change the medical facts. But the damage was done. The next morning, 3 more nurses from Cascade Regional came forward. Different departments, different shifts, but the same story. Dr. Hayward had a pattern of dismissing staff concerns, overriding experienced nurses, and prioritizing his authority over patient welfare. One of them had documentation going back 2 years. This changes everything, Rebecca said over the phone. It's not just about Kowalski anymore. It's about systemic problems, pattern of behavior. Can we use it? Already filed it with the prosecutor's office. The grand jury is going to see this before they vote. That afternoon, Zara got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Vance, this is Jennifer Park, General Counsel for Cascade Regional Medical Center. Zara's stomach dropped. The hospital's board of directors would like to meet with you, privately, to discuss a potential resolution to the current situation. A resolution? We believe there may have been miscommunications regarding Mr. Kowalski's treatment. We'd like to explore options that might avoid prolonged litigation. Translation: they wanted to settle. Pay her off, make her go away, bury the whole thing under a non-disclosure agreement. I'm not interested in a settlement, Zara said. We're prepared to offer reinstatement with full back pay, a formal apology, and a substantial financial— I said I'm not interested. Park's tone cooled. Mustas. Vance, I strongly encourage you to consult with your attorney before— I don't need to consult anyone. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. We can offer that too. Dr. Hayward has agreed to additional training, a formal review of— Training? Zara's voice went flat. A man is dead and you're offering training? We're trying to find a reasonable solution that— There is no reasonable solution. There's only justice. Zara hung up. Her hands were shaking. She'd just turned down what was probably a 6-figure settlement, turned down reinstatement, turned down the easy way out. Rebecca called 5 minutes later. They just contacted me too. Zara, you should at least hear the full offer. No. It's a lot of money, enough to never work again, enough to— I don't want their money. I want them held accountable. Rebecca sighed. I respect that. But you need to understand what you're turning down. This goes to trial. You could lose. You could end up with nothing except legal bills and a destroyed reputation. Then that's what happens. Why are you doing this? And don't tell me it's just about Kowalski. This is personal. Zara looked out her window at the Seattle skyline. Gray and rainy, like always. I spent 20 years watching the system protect itself, she said quietly. Watching people with power use that power to avoid consequences. I was part of it. Every time I kept my mouth shut, every time I didn't push back, I was complicit. That's not fair to yourself. It's completely fair. I knew better. I had the training, the experience, the knowledge. But I didn't have the credentials, so I convinced myself it wasn't my place to speak up. Her voice hardened. Well, David Ruiz and Sarah Lindstrom died because I made hard choices in combat. James Kowalski died because I didn't make hard choices in a hospital. So yeah, it's personal. Because I'm done letting credentials matter more than competence. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Okay, we go to trial, but Zara? We play to win. Anything less would be an insult. The grand jury convened the following Monday. Zara wasn't allowed in the room. Grand jury proceedings were secret, but she waited in the courthouse hallway with Maya and Rebecca, while 12 citizens decided whether there was enough evidence to indict Marcus Hayward for criminal negligence. It took 4 hours. When the prosecutor finally emerged, his expression was carefully neutral. The grand jury has returned an indictment. Dr. Marcus Hayward will face charges of involuntary manslaughter and criminal negligence resulting in death. Zara felt her knees go weak. What about the hospital? Rebecca asked. Separate civil action. The family of Mr. Kowalski. He didn't have family, Zara said. Actually, he does. An aunt in New Mexico. She's filed a wrongful death lawsuit against both Dr. Hayward and Cascade Regional. The prosecutor's expression softened. Your testimony was compelling, Ms. Vance. The jury had very few questions. After he left, Maya hugged her mother tight. You did it. We did it. No. Maya pulled back, her eyes bright. You did this. You stood up when nobody else would. But it didn't feel like victory yet. Indictment wasn't conviction. The trial could take months. Hayward's lawyers would appeal, delay, file motions. The system had 1,000 ways to protect itself. Still, it was something. They were walking to the parking garage when Zara's phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. You should have taken this settlement. Now you're going to regret this. She showed it to Maya, who immediately called her NCIS contact. But they all knew the truth. The threats would continue. The pressure would intensify. This was just beginning. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the trial, about testimony, about facing Hayward in court, about the possibility that despite everything, he might walk free. At 2 a.m., she gave up and made coffee. Sat at her kitchen table with Kowalski's file spread out in front of her. She'd read it a dozen times, but tonight something caught her eye. The intake form from the police who'd brought him in. Standard information, name, age, address. Emergency contact, none. Next of kin, none. Except now there was an aunt, filing a wrongful death suit. Zara pulled up her laptop, started searching, found the lawsuit filing. Paulina Kowalski, age 67, Albuquerque, New Mexico. She dug deeper, found an obituary from 2018. Thomas Kowalski, survived by his wife Paulina and nephew James. Uncle, not aunt. But the prosecutor had said aunt. Zara's pulse quickened. She searched for Paulina Kowalski's contact information, found a phone number. It was 2 a.m. in Seattle, which meant 3 a.m. in New Mexico, but she called anyway. A woman answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep. Hello? Mrs. Kowalski, I'm sorry to call so late. My name is Zara Vance. I'm calling about your nephew James. A pause. I don't have a nephew named James. Zara's blood went cold. You're not filing a wrongful death lawsuit? A what? No, I don't know what you're talking about. You're Paulina Kowalski, married to Thomas Kowalski. Yes, but did your husband have a nephew? No, Thomas was an only child. Who is this? What's going on? Zara apologized, hung up, and immediately called Rebecca. The wrongful death lawsuit is fake, she said when Rebecca answered. The family doesn't exist. That's impossible. The court filing is fraudulent. Someone created a fake plaintiff to muddy the waters. Rebecca swore. If that's true, we need to report it immediately. Filing false legal documents is not the point. Zara's mind was racing. Why would someone create a fake lawsuit? What does it accomplish? Confuses the case, splits the legal focus, maybe even creates grounds for dismissal if they can argue the criminal case is prejudiced by civil proceedings. Or, Zara said slowly, it gives Hayward's team a way to control information. They're representing the fake plaintiff. They have access to discovery. They can see our entire strategy. Silence on the other end. We need to tell the prosecutor, Rebecca said finally. Tonight. The prosecutor wasn't happy about being woken at 3 a.m., but he was even less happy about the fake lawsuit. By morning, federal investigators were involved: wire fraud, falsification of legal documents, possibly obstruction of justice. But the damage was done. Hayward's legal team had seen Rebecca's entire case strategy. They knew which witnesses she planned to call, which evidence she'd present, which arguments she'd make. They'd effectively stolen the playbook. We start over, Rebecca said in an emergency meeting that morning. New strategy, new witnesses, new approach. We don't tell anyone what we're doing until we're standing in front of the judge. They'll know we know, Maya pointed out. They'll adjust. Let them. We'll adjust faster. But adjusting meant more delays, more depositions, more time for Hayward's team to find new ways to attack. And they did. That afternoon, someone leaked Zara's full military record to the press. Not the sanitized version, the complete file, including the after-action reports from Kandahar, including the names of David Ruiz and Sarah Lindstrom. Within hours, their families were being contacted by reporters, asked about the combat medic who'd chosen to save SEALs instead of Marines, asked if they blamed Zara for their children's deaths. Ruiz's mother gave an interview. I don't know what happened over there, she said, her voice breaking. I just know my son died calling for help that never came. If this woman had training and supplies and chose not to help him, then yes, I have questions. The story went viral. Zara watched the interview with Maya, her chest tight. She doesn't know, Maya said quietly. She doesn't understand battlefield triage. She doesn't need to understand. She just needs to believe I let her son die. You didn't. I know what I did. Zara's voice was hollow. And I'd do it again, but that doesn't make it hurt less. Her phone rang. Rebecca. Don't read the comments, her lawyer said immediately. Don't watch the news. Don't engage. Too late. Zara, this is exactly what they wanted. They leaked your file to distract from Hayward's trial, to make you the story instead of him. It's working. Only if we let it. Rebecca's voice hardened. We fight back. I'm scheduling a response. You, Maya, and a representative from the military to explain battlefield medicine. We turn this around. But before they could organize anything, the hospital made its move. Cascade Regional filed a countersuit. against Zara for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business relationships. They were suing her for $40 million. The news broke during the evening broadcast. Zara watched the hospital's spokesperson explain how her reckless accusations had damaged the hospital's reputation, cost them patients, and harmed staff morale. "We support accountability," the spokesperson said smoothly. "But Ms. Vance's campaign has crossed the line from whistleblowing into character assassination. We're simply defending our right to operate without coordinated attacks from disgruntled former employees." Maya threw a coffee mug at the TV. It missed, hit the wall, shattered. $40 million, she said, her voice shaking with rage. "They're trying to bankrupt you into silence." "They're trying to scare me," Zara corrected. "There's a difference." "Is it working?" Zara thought about that. About 20 years of being scared, of running, of hiding from conflict because the cost was always too high. About David Ruiz calling for his mother while she worked on someone else. About James Kowalski dying alone in a hospital room. About every person she hadn't saved because she'd been too afraid to try. "No," she said finally. "It's not working anymore." Rebecca called an hour later with worse news. The trial judge recused himself. Conflict of interest. Apparently he's on the board of a medical charity that Cascade Regional donates to. So we get a new judge. We get whoever's available. Could be someone sympathetic. Could be someone who thinks nurses should stay in their lane. Rebecca paused. And the new trial date is pushed back 6 months. 6 more months of this. 6 more months of attacks, threats, legal maneuvering. 6 more months of watching Hayward walk free while his lawyers dismantled her life piece by piece. "We can't wait 6 months," Zara said. We don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." That night, Zara made a decision. She called Lieutenant Colonel Reeves. "I need to know who accessed my classified file," she said. "Not the person who leaked it, the person who originally requested it. That information is restricted. Then unrestrict it, because someone with high-level clearance gave that file to Hayward's lawyers, and I want to know who." Reeves was quiet for a long moment. "This isn't protocol. Protocol isn't working." Another pause. "Give me 48 hours. 47 hours later, Reeves called back. The access request came from the Pentagon, Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. Zara's breath stopped. Why would the Pentagon care about a wrongful death case in Seattle? They wouldn't, unless someone with influence asked them to care. Who? That's where the trail goes cold. But Zara? Whoever requested this has serious connections. Military brass, political influence, maybe both. This isn't just a hospital covering its ass. This is bigger. After Reeves hung up, Zara sat in her dark apartment trying to process it. The Pentagon was involved. Someone with enough power to access classified records, create fake lawsuits, and coordinate a multi-pronged legal attack. Someone who wanted her destroyed. But why? What was she close to that scared them this much? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Vance, you don't know me, but I know you." The voice was male, older, with a slight southern accent. "I'm calling to give you a warning. The people you're fighting have resources you can't imagine. They've already made 3 attempts to make you go away quietly. The next attempt won't be quiet." "Who is this?" "Someone who's seen what they do to problems that don't disappear." A pause. James Kowalski wasn't the first veteran to die under suspicious circumstances at Cascade Regional. He was the 5th in 3 years. Zara's world tilted. "What?" "Check the VA database. Cross-reference veteran patient deaths at that hospital. You'll find a pattern. And when you do, you'll understand why they're so desperate to stop you." "Who are you?" "A friend. Or at least someone who wants the same thing you do." The voice softened. "Be careful, Ms. Vance. You're not fighting a negligent doctor anymore. You're fighting something much worse." The line went dead. Zara immediately called Maya, told her everything. 5 veterans? Maya's voice was tight. "We need to verify this." "How?" "I've got VA access. Give me an hour." It took 90 minutes. When Maya called back, her voice was different, harder. He was right. 5 veteran deaths in 3 years, all in the psychiatric wing, all ruled as complications from pre-existing conditions or unfortunate reactions to treatment. Let me guess. All treated by Hayward? No, that's the thing. Different doctors, different nurses, different circumstances. The only common factor is the hospital. Zara's mind raced. So this isn't about one bad doctor. This is about something systemic. Or intentional. The word hung in the air like smoke. You think someone's killing veterans? Zara asked. I think someone's not trying very hard to keep them alive. Whether that's negligence or malice, I don't know. But 5 deaths in 3 years? That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. We need to tell Rebecca, the prosecutor, the FBI. We need evidence first, real evidence. Because if we go public with this and we're wrong, they'll bury us. And if we're right? Maya didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was grim. Then we just stumbled into something that people with Pentagon connections are willing to kill to protect. The evidence came in pieces over the next 72 hours, each one more damning than the last. Maya worked her VA contacts while Zara pulled hospital records through a source she'd cultivated during her years at Cascade Regional, a records clerk who'd always liked her, and who was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the pressure from administration to make certain files disappear. The first veteran was Thomas Brennan. Age 41, Army infantry, 3 deployments to Iraq. Admitted for severe PTSD after a suicide attempt. Died 6 days later from what the chart called acute cardiac event secondary to agitated delirium. The second was Maria Gonzalez. Age 37, Marine Corps logistics, Afghanistan veteran. Admitted for treatment-resistant depression. Died after what was documented as unexpected adverse reaction to medication. The third was Kevin Lamont. Age 29, Navy corpsman, 2 deployments. Admitted for acute psychotic episode. Died from respiratory failure during restraint procedure. The fourth was Richard Moss, age 52, Air Force, Gulf War veteran. Admitted for alcohol withdrawal and suicidal ideation. Died from complications related to delirium tremens. And then James Kowalski, age 36, Army infantry, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Died from cardiac arrest during psychiatric crisis. 5 deaths. All veterans. All within 3 years. All ruled as tragic but unavoidable complications of their underlying conditions. But when Maya cross-referenced the medication records, a pattern emerged. All 5 had been given the same drug cocktail within hours of admission. A combination of sedatives and antipsychotics that, individually, were standard psychiatric care. Together, in the doses administered, they created a potentially lethal interaction, especially in patients already physiologically compromised by PTSD, substance abuse, or other combat-related conditions. It's not technically malpractice, Maya said, her laptop open on Zara's kitchen table at 3 a.m. Each drug is appropriate for psychiatric emergencies. The doses are within acceptable ranges, but combined in patients with the specific risk factors these veterans all had, it's like giving someone with a heart condition a stress test and a shot of adrenaline. Sure, either one alone might be fine. Together, you're asking for cardiac arrest. So either someone's incompetent or someone's doing it on purpose, Zara said. Incompetence doesn't explain why it keeps happening. 5 times over 3 years? With the same drug combination? That's not coincidence. Then what is it? Maya pulled up another file. This is the interesting part. All 5 deaths triggered substantial insurance payouts. Life insurance policies, VA benefits, survivor benefits. We're talking 7 figures per case. Who received the money? Next of kin in most cases. But here's where it gets weird. In 3 out of 5 cases, the next of kin signed over their legal rights to pursue wrongful death claims. They received the insurance money and agreed not to sue the hospital. Zara felt ice settle in her stomach. Someone paid them off. Or convinced them that pursuing a lawsuit would be too expensive, too traumatic, too unlikely to succeed. Maya's jaw tightened. Probably both. Offer them a clean insurance payout, tell them the hospital did everything possible, maybe even throw in a small settlement to cover funeral costs. Most families take it because they're grieving and exhausted and don't have the resources to fight. But the insurance payouts, those go to the families. Who benefits from the deaths? That's what I can't figure out. Maya scrolled through more documents. Unless... She stopped. Her face went pale. What? The hospital's insurance carrier. They're self-insured through a subsidiary of Meridian Financial Group, and Meridian just happens to be one of the largest defense contractors in the country. They handle everything from military logistics to VA hospital management to pharmaceutical trials, Zara finished, her mind racing. You think they're testing drugs on veterans? I think someone's found a way to make money off dead veterans while making it look like standard psychiatric care. Maya pulled up another document. Look at this. 3 months after each death, Cascade Regional received substantial grants for their psychiatric research program, all from Meridian-affiliated foundations. The pieces click together with horrible clarity. Veterans with complex psychiatric conditions admitted to a hospital with financial ties to a defense contractor. Aggressive medication protocols that push the boundaries of safe treatment. Deaths that could be explained away as complications. Families paid off. Research grants flowing to the hospital. And anyone who asked questions, like Zara, systematically destroyed. We need to take this to the FBI, Zara said. Now. With what? We've got correlation, not causation. Nothing that directly proves intentional harm. Then we find proof. How? Zara thought for a moment. The anonymous caller. He knew about the pattern, which means he's either involved or he knows who is. He also said the next attempt to make you disappear wouldn't be quiet. That sounds like a threat. Or a warning. Zara pulled out her phone. Either way, he knows something, and I'm going to find out what. She had the phone company pull records for the incoming call. Burner phone, no surprise. But the cell tower ping put it in downtown Seattle, a business district. Maya used her military intelligence contacts to narrow it down. The call had lasted 90 seconds. During that time, 3 other calls had pinged the same tower, all from the same area. One of them was to a number they recognized, Richard Caldwell, Hayward's lead attorney. The caller contacted Caldwell right after talking to you, Maya said. Why would someone warning you about a conspiracy immediately call the defense lawyer? Because he's playing both sides, Zara said slowly, feeding us information while covering his tracks with them. Or setting us up. Only one way to find out. Rebecca was less enthusiastic when they brought her the evidence the next morning. This is speculation built on correlation, built on hunches, she said, spreading the documents across her desk. Yes, there's a pattern. Yes, it's suspicious, but nothing here proves intentional harm. And if we go public with this and we're wrong, the defamation suit against you becomes airtight. And if we're right, Zara asked, then we're accusing a major defense contractor of murdering veterans for profit. Do you understand the resources they'll bring against us? The lawyers, the investigators, the political pressure? Meridian has contracts with half the government. They're not going to let a nurse and a military lawyer take them down. So we do nothing? I didn't say that. Rebecca pulled out her phone. I'm saying we build an actual case. We get subpoenas for the pharmacy records. We find someone inside the hospital willing to testify. We get the VA Inspector General involved. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. But doing it right took time they didn't have. That afternoon, the judge in the criminal case against Hayward issued a ruling on a defense motion. Due to the publicity surrounding the case and the potential prejudice from Zara's press conference, the trial was being moved, not just delayed, moved to a different jurisdiction. Eastern Washington, where the jury pool hadn't been saturated with coverage of the case, where nobody knew who Zara was or why her testimony mattered. They're trying to dilute your impact, Rebecca explained. In Seattle, you're the veteran nurse who stood up to a negligent doctor. In Spokane, you're just another witness with an axe to grind. Can they do that? They just did. The new trial date was set for 8 weeks out, which gave Hayward's team 8 more weeks to dismantle Zara's credibility, pressure witnesses, and bury evidence. But it also gave Zara 8 weeks to build her case against Meridian. She started with the families. Thomas Brennan's sister lived in Tacoma. Zara drove there on a gray Saturday morning, rehearsing what she'd say. How do you ask someone to relive their grief because you think their brother's death might be part of something larger? The sister's name was Jennifer. She answered the door with a toddler on her hip and suspicion in her eyes. I know who you are, she said before Zara could introduce herself. You're the nurse from the news, the one suing the hospital. I'm not suing them. They're suing me. Same difference. But Jennifer stepped back, let her in. You've got 5 minutes. Zara used 3 of them, laying out the pattern. 5 veterans, similar circumstances, same drug combination. Suspicious timing. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. Tommy had PTSD, she said when Zara finished. Bad. He tried to kill himself twice before they admitted him. The hospital said they did everything they could. I'm sure they did. But what if everything they could wasn't enough? What if there were protocols that could have prevented his death? What are you asking me? I'm asking if anyone from the hospital contacted you after Tommy died, offered you money, asked you to sign anything. Jennifer's face closed off. I need you to leave. Please, if something wrong happened, I said leave. Jennifer's voice was firm but not angry. Scared, maybe. I got 2 kids to raise on my own. I can't afford to get involved in whatever crusade you're on. Zara tried 2 more families, got the same response. Fear disguised as disinterest. Doors closed politely but firmly. She was driving back to Seattle when Maya called. Someone broke into my apartment. Zara's hands tightened on the wheel. Are you okay? I wasn't home, but they went through everything. Files, laptop, phone records. They were looking for something. The evidence we compiled. Already sent to 3 different secure locations. They didn't find anything. Maya paused. But Mom, this is escalating. First the threats, now breaking and entering. They're getting desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people also get dangerous. That night, Zara couldn't sleep again. She kept thinking about the families, about Jennifer Brennan's fear, about how Meridian had locked down every potential witness with money and legal threats and the grinding exhaustion of grief, about how the system protected itself by making resistance too expensive, too exhausting, too dangerous. She was staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. when her phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Underground parking garage, 4th and Pine, 3 a.m. Come alone. Every instinct screamed trap, but every other avenue had dead-ended. She texted Maya. Going to meet the caller. If you don't hear from me by 4 a.m., call the FBI. Maya's response was immediate. The hell you are? I'm coming with you. No. If this goes sideways, someone needs to know what we found. Then I'm tracking your phone and calling the cops if you're not back by 3:30. Deal. The parking garage at 4th and Pine was mostly empty at 3 a.m. Zara parked on the 2nd level, left her car running, kept her phone in her hand with 911 pre-dialed. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. A man emerged, late 60s, gray hair, expensive suit that had seen better days. He looked like a lawyer who'd aged out of relevance. Miss Vance, thank you for coming. Who are you? Someone who used to work for Meridian Financial Group, specifically their pharmaceutical research division. He kept his distance, hands visible. My name is Dr. Gerald Hartman. 15 years ago, I helped design a clinical trial for a new psychiatric medication. The trial was problematic. Problematic how? The drug was effective for treating acute PTSD symptoms, but it had severe side effects when combined with other common psychiatric medications. Cardiac complications, respiratory depression, seizures. We documented all of this in our research. Zara's pulse quickened. Let me guess. Meridian buried the research. Worse, they saw an opportunity. Hartman pulled out a folder, handed it to her. The drug never made it to market as a PTSD treatment, too many safety concerns, but the individual components were already FDA approved for other uses. So Meridian started testing. Testing what? Whether the adverse interactions could be useful. Specifically, whether they could create a plausibly deniable method of reducing long-term VA healthcare costs. The words hit like a physical blow. You're saying they're killing veterans on purpose. I'm saying they're conducting unauthorized human trials on vulnerable psychiatric patients to determine if certain drug combinations can naturally reduce the population requiring expensive long-term care. Hartman's voice was hollow. It's genocide dressed up as health care, and it's being done with taxpayer money through VA contracts. Zara opened the folder. Inside were research protocols, internal memos, financial projections showing millions saved by reducing the veteran patient population through expected mortality increases. Why are you giving this to me? Because I've tried everything else. I went to the FDA, Meridian's lawyer shut it down. I went to congressional oversight. Meridian has too many friends in Congress. I went to the press. Meridian threatened to sue them into bankruptcy. Hartman's hands shook slightly. You're the only person who's gotten close enough to hurt them, the only person they're actually afraid of. Why now? Why not 5 years ago when this started? Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months if I'm lucky. He smiled bitterly. Turns out having nothing left to lose is very liberating. This evidence, it's enough to prosecute? It's enough to destroy them, if it reaches the right people. If it's not buried by lawyers and politicians and the 1,000 ways powerful people protect themselves. Zara looked at the documents, saw confirmation of everything she'd suspected, saw proof that James Kowalski hadn't just died from negligence. He'd died as part of a calculated plan to reduce costs by eliminating expensive patients. What do you need from me? She asked. Get this to the FBI. The real FBI, not the Seattle field office. Go straight to the criminal division at Main Justice in D.C. Ask for Deputy Assistant Attorney General Morrison. Give him this. Hartman handed her a business card. Tell him Gerald Hartman is ready to testify. Tell him I have 20 years of documentation. Tell him I want immunity and witness protection in exchange for everything I know. Will he listen? He's the only person at Justice who hasn't been compromised by Meridian's lobbying. If anyone will prosecute this, it's him. Hartman stepped back. Be careful, Ms. Vance. You've just become the most dangerous person to them. They'll do whatever it takes to stop you. He disappeared back into the stairwell before Zara could respond. She sat in her car for 5 minutes, the folder on her lap, trying to process what she'd just learned. They weren't just covering up negligence, they were systematically killing veterans, and she was holding the proof. Her phone rang. Maya. I'm okay, Zara said immediately. I'm coming home, and we need to call Rebecca, tonight. What happened? I'll explain when I get there, but Maya, we were right. About all of it. The emergency meeting happened in Rebecca's office at 5 a.m. Zara laid out everything, the documents, Hartman's testimony, the pharmaceutical trials, the financial motive. Rebecca read through it all twice, her expression growing darker with each page. This is bigger than I thought, she said finally. This isn't medical malpractice. This is organized crime, fraud, conspiracy, murder for hire, dressed up as clinical research. Can we use it? Maya asked. We have to. If this is real, and it looks real, then every veteran who died at Cascade Regional was murdered, including James Kowalski. Rebecca looked at Zara. You understand what this means? You're not just fighting a hospital anymore. You're fighting a multi-billion-dollar defense contractor with ties to every level of government. I know. They will come at you with everything. They'll discredit you, bankrupt you, maybe even try to have you arrested on trumped-up charges. And that's if you're lucky. What's unlucky? Rebecca didn't answer, didn't need to. We take this to Morrison, Zara said. Like Hartman said, bypass the local system entirely. I'll make the call. Rebecca picked up her phone, then paused. Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be a federal witness in a major criminal conspiracy case. Your life will never be private again. It's not private now. Fair point. The call to D.C. went through the Justice Department's main switchboard. Rebecca asked for Morrison's office, was transferred 3 times, finally reached someone who would take a message. Tell him it's regarding Meridian Financial Group and a whistleblower in a veteran death case. Tell him Gerald Hartman is ready to cooperate. We'll send documentation via secure courier today. She hung up. Now we wait. They didn't wait long. 2 hours later, Rebecca's phone rang. She stepped into another room to take it. When she came back, her expression was unreadable. That was Morrison's office. They want the documents, today, and they want you, both of you, available for immediate depositions. They're taking it seriously, Maya said. They're terrified. Whatever's in those documents, it's enough to make Main Justice move immediately. Rebecca pulled up her email. They're sending a protective detail, federal marshals. You're both in witness protection effective immediately. Zara's stomach dropped. What about the trial? The criminal trial against Hayward? That's about to become very complicated. If the Justice Department files federal charges related to a conspiracy to defraud the VA and commit murder, the state case becomes secondary. So Hayward walks? Hayward becomes a potential witness against Meridian. or he becomes a co-conspirator. Depends on what he knew and when. Rebecca started packing her briefcase. Either way, the stakes just got exponentially higher. The federal marshals arrived that afternoon. Two of them, professional and efficient, who swept Zara's apartment for bugs, secured her documents and explained the new rules. No contact with unauthorized persons, no public statements, no social media. Complete information blackout until the investigation concluded. How long? Zara asked. However long it takes, one of the marshals said. Could be weeks, could be months. I have a trial in 8 weeks. Not anymore. They were relocated to a safe house outside the city. Small, nondescript, the kind of place that disappeared into its suburban neighborhood. Maya stayed with her. Rebecca coordinated everything from her office, now working with a team of federal prosecutors who'd been read into the case. The documents Hartman provided were even worse than Zara had initially realized. 20 years of research showing that Meridian had deliberately targeted veterans with PTSD because their underlying conditions made adverse drug reactions easier to explain. They'd embedded researchers in VA hospitals across the country, not to improve care, but to refine their methods. Cascade Regional was just one of 12 hospitals involved, which meant dozens of veterans had potentially been murdered. The scope was staggering. 3 days into protective custody, Rebecca arrived with news. Hartman's dead. Zara's breath stopped. How? Car accident. Single vehicle collision on a rural highway. Police are calling it a tragic accident. Fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the center line, hit a tree. Rebecca's expression was grim. No witnesses. Very convenient timing. They killed him. Can't prove it, but yes, probably. Rebecca set down her briefcase. The good news is he had already given his deposition to the Justice Department. Everything he told you, plus 20 years of testimony about Meridian's operations. His death doesn't invalidate that testimony. But it sends a message, Maya said, a very clear one. That night, Zara couldn't stop thinking about Hartman, a man who'd spent 15 years trying to expose what he'd helped create, who'd finally found someone willing to listen, who died 3 days later on a dark highway with no witnesses. She wondered if he'd known, if he'd suspected that giving her those documents was signing his own death warrant. She thought he probably had. The next morning, the news broke. Federal agents raided Meridian Financial Group's headquarters in Virginia. Simultaneous raids on Cascade Regional and 11 other hospitals across the country. The Justice Department announced an investigation into widespread fraud, conspiracy, and what they carefully called potential criminal negligence resulting in patient deaths. The media went insane. By noon, every major outlet was running stories about a defense contractor accused of killing veterans for profit. Zara's name was everywhere again, but this time as a federal witness whose testimony had triggered the largest VA fraud investigation in history. Hayward's legal team immediately filed motions to dismiss the state case, claiming the federal investigation had prejudiced any potential jury. The hospital's $40 million lawsuit against Zara was quietly withdrawn. Cascade Regional's CEO resigned to focus on family. Everything Zara had fought for was happening, but it felt hollow. Because Hartman was dead, because 5 veterans were still dead, because the system that had allowed this to happen was still intact, just scrambling to cover its tracks. Rebecca visited 3 days later with an update. Meridian is negotiating a settlement with Justice. They'll admit to administrative violations, pay a substantial fine, submit to federal oversight, and cooperate with ongoing investigations. What about the murders? They're claiming everything was accidental. Mistakes made by well-meaning researchers. Unfortunate outcomes from aggressive but appropriate treatment protocols. Rebecca's voice was bitter. Classic corporate strategy. Admit to the financial crimes, settle for billions, avoid anyone going to prison for the actual murders. That's not justice. No, but it might be the best we get. What about Hayward? He's cooperating, giving testimony about the research protocols Meridian asked him to follow. Says he didn't know about the broader conspiracy, just thought he was participating in cutting-edge psychiatric research. Do you believe him? Doesn't matter what I believe. Matters what the prosecutors can prove. Rebecca pulled out another document. There's something else. The VA is launching its own investigation into veteran deaths at facilities with Meridian contracts. They've identified over 60 suspicious cases in the last 5 years. Your testimony, everything you documented about Kowalski, that's the foundation of the entire investigation. 60 cases. 60 veterans who might have been murdered while the system looked the other way. What happens now? Zara asked. Now you testify to a grand jury, then probably a congressional committee, then the criminal trials, if they happen. You're going to be in the spotlight for a long time. I just wanted someone to listen about James Kowalski. Well, everyone's listening now. Rebecca managed a small smile. You did it, Zara. You took on a multi-billion-dollar corporation and the entire VA healthcare system, and you won. But it didn't feel like winning. That night, lying in a safe house bed in a room that wasn't hers, Zara thought about all the ways this could have gone differently. If she'd just kept her head down. If she'd let Kowalski's death be ruled as unfortunate circumstances. If she'd taken the settlement and disappeared. She'd still have a career, still have her privacy, still have a life that didn't involve federal protection and congressional testimony. But 5 dead veterans would still be buried with no one asking why. And the next veteran to walk into Cascade Regional would be walking into the same trap. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a saved news article, the one that had started all of this. Veteran dies in psychiatric crisis. Hospital defends treatment protocols. Below it was a photo. James Kowalski in uniform, younger, smiling. Before Afghanistan, before the PTSD, before the system chewed him up and spit him out. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Zara whispered to the photo, but I made sure they can't do this to anyone else. Her phone buzzed, text from Maya, who was in the next room. You awake? Yeah, want to talk? Not really, too bad. Coming over. Maya appeared a minute later with 2 mugs of tea and the determined expression that meant she wasn't leaving until they'd talked this through. You're drowning, Maya said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I can see it. I'm fine. You're lying. Maya handed her a mug. Mom, you just took down one of the largest defense contractors in the country. You exposed a conspiracy that killed dozens of veterans. You did what thousands of whistleblowers try and fail to do every year. So why do you look like you lost? Zara stared into her tea. Because Hartman's dead. Because the people responsible will probably never see a prison cell. Because Meridian will pay some fines and rebrand and be back to business as usual in 5 years. She looked up. I wanted justice. Real justice. Not just corporate settlements and congressional hearings that lead to policy recommendations nobody follows. You wanted someone to pay. I wanted someone to care. Really care, not just performatively care when the cameras are on. Maya was quiet for a moment. You know what James would say if he could? Don't. He'd say thank you for trying, for fighting when nobody else would, for making his death mean something more than just another statistic. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because that's what I'd say. Maya's voice softened. He saved my life in Kandahar. You fought for his when nobody else would. That matters, Mom, even if it doesn't feel like enough. They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, watching the sun come up through the safe house windows. Finally, Maya spoke again. What are you going to do? After the trials, after the testimony, after all of this is over? Zara hadn't let herself think that far ahead, hadn't dared imagine a future beyond the next deposition, the next court appearance, the next fight. I don't know, she admitted. I can't go back to nursing. Not after this. You could consult, train trauma teams, teach combat medicine to civilian hospitals. Maybe. Or you could do nothing. Take the settlement money, because you know there's going to be settlement money, and disappear. Buy a cabin somewhere. Be invisible again. The offer was tempting. After months of scrutiny, of threats, of living under federal protection, the idea of disappearing sounded like peace. But Zara had spent 20 years being invisible, and it had cost James Kowalski his life. No, she said finally. No more disappearing? Maya smiled. Good, because I was really hoping you'd say that. Why? Because I put in for a transfer, stateside assignment, trauma training division. Maya's smile widened. Figured you could use a partner, someone who actually understands what you're trying to do. Zara felt something loosen in her chest. You'd give up your deployment for that? I'm not giving up anything. I'm investing in something better. Maya stood, stretched. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't take on the entire military-industrial complex single-handedly next time. Next time? You really think this is over? Maya laughed. Mom, you just proved that one nurse with enough stubbornness can take down billion-dollar corporations. Every whistleblower, every advocate, every person who's been told they're not important enough to matter, they're all going to come to you now. You're going to be fighting battles like this for the rest of your life. That sounds exhausting. Probably, but also kind of badass. Despite everything, Zara smiled. 2 weeks later, she testified before a grand jury, gave them everything, the timeline of Kowalski's death, the documentation she'd compiled, the pattern of veteran deaths, the pharmaceutical trial documents Hartman had provided. The grand jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned indictments against 17 Meridian executives, 5 hospital administrators, and Dr. Marcus Hayward. Charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy to commit murder. The news broke during prime time. Zara watched it from the safe house with Maya and Rebecca, seeing her own face flash across the screen as reporters explained how a night nurse had exposed one of the largest medical fraud cases in U.S. history. How does it feel? Rebecca asked. Surreal. Get used to it. Congressional testimony is scheduled for next month. They're going to make this a whole thing. Televised hearings, media coverage, the works. Can I say no? You could, but then you'd just be letting politicians control the narrative without your voice in it. Zara sighed. When does this get easier? It doesn't, but it gets more familiar. That night, alone in her room, Zara pulled up an email that had been forwarded to her through official channels, from Jennifer Brennan, Thomas Brennan's sister. Ms. Vance, I saw the news. I'm sorry I didn't help you when you came to my house. I was scared, but I want you to know Tommy would be proud of what you did. He always said the system was broken, that nobody cared about veterans once we stopped being useful. You proved him wrong. Thank you. Zara read it 3 times, her throat tight. Then she started writing responses to the other families. To Maria Gonzalez's parents, to Kevin Lamont's brother, to Richard Moss's widow, telling them the truth about how their loved ones died, telling them they mattered, telling them someone had finally listened. The responses came slowly over the next few days, some angry, some grateful, some just empty. Too tired to feel anything anymore. But they came. And with them came something Zara hadn't expected. Offers to testify, to share their own stories, to join the fight. By the end of the week, Rebecca had statements from 9 families willing to go on record about suspicious circumstances surrounding their loved ones' deaths, willing to stand up and demand answers, willing to stop being invisible. The federal trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, Meridian's stock price collapsed. Their CEO resigned. 3 board members were arrested trying to flee the country. The VA announced a complete overhaul of its pharmaceutical oversight protocols. And Chief James Kowalski's dog was released from the animal control facility where he'd been held since the incident. Zara adopted him. You sure about this? Maya asked, watching Chief sniff around the safe house backyard. He's a lot of dog. He deserves better than a shelter. Zara knelt down, let Chief approach on his own terms. The dog's tail wagged once, tentatively. Besides, we've both lost someone. Seems fitting. Chief pressed his head against her hand. Not guarding anymore, just present. For the first time in months, Zara felt something close to peace, but it didn't last. 3 days before her congressional testimony, Rebecca called with news that made Zara's blood run cold. The whistleblower protection detail picked up chatter. Someone's put a contract out. On you. A contract. Professional. $500,000. The U.S. Marshals are taking it seriously. How seriously? They want to move you to a secure federal facility until after the testimony. Maximum security. No visitors except legal counsel. For how long? However long it takes to neutralize the threat. Zara looked at Chief, sleeping peacefully on the carpet. Thought about Maya in the next room, about the families waiting for justice, about the testimony that could finally hold people accountable. No, she said. Zara, I said no. I've spent enough time hiding. If someone wants to kill me, they'll have to do it in public. On camera, where everyone can see exactly what happens to people who fight back. That's not brave, that's suicidal. Maybe, but I'm done running. Zara's voice was steel. I testify as scheduled, in public. Let them try. Rebecca was silent for a long moment. I'll inform the marshals. But Zara? If something happens to you, then Maya takes over. And the next person. And the next. Because that's how this works. They can't kill all of us. The call ended. Zara sat in the darkening safe house, Chief's weight warm against her leg, and wondered if she'd just made the bravest decision of her life or the stupidest. Probably both. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered, Ms. Vance? The voice was synthesized, distorted, untraceable. You've caused considerable problems for a lot of very powerful people. Good. A laugh, dry and mechanical. You're either very brave or very stupid, possibly both. What do you want? To offer you one final chance. Drop the congressional testimony. Recant your grand jury statement. Disappear. We'll call off the contract. You live quietly, and everyone moves on. And if I say no, then you die. Publicly. Messily. And we make sure everyone knows what happens to people who don't know when to quit. Zara's hand tightened on the phone. I've been shot at by people a lot scarier than you. I've held dying soldiers while mortars fell. I've made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. You think a death threat scares me? It should. It doesn't. Because here's what you don't understand. I've already lost everything. My career, my privacy, my peace. The only thing I have left is the truth. And I'll be damned if I let you take that too. Silence on the other end. Then, we'll see. The line went dead. Zara sat there for a long moment, her heart hammering, her hand shaking slightly. Then she called Rebecca back. Whatever happens, she said, make sure the testimony gets entered into the record, even if I'm not there to give it. Zara, promise me. A long pause. I promise. Good. She hung up. Fed chief, made dinner, tried to act normal even though every instinct screamed that she'd just painted a target on her back. Maya found her an hour later, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street. You okay? Someone called. Anonymous. Said there's a contract on me. Maya went very still. When? 20 minutes ago. And you're just now telling me. I'm telling you now. Zara turned. They gave me an ultimatum. Drop the testimony or die. Obviously, you told them to go to hell. Obviously. Maya pulled out her phone. I'm calling the marshals. We need to No. We stick to the plan. I testify. Whatever happens, happens. Mom, they're going to kill you. Maybe. Zara's voice was surprisingly calm. But they can't stop what I've already started. The investigation is happening. The trials are happening. The families are speaking up. Killing me doesn't change any of that. It just makes them look more guilty. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's just true. Maya stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm not leaving your side until this is over. I wouldn't expect anything less. They spent the evening going over Zara's testimony, refining statements, preparing for hostile questions, trying to act like the threat wasn't real, like tomorrow wasn't potentially the last normal day either of them would have. At midnight, Zara finally went to bed, lay there in the darkness, listening to Chief's breathing, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 20 years of being invisible, 20 years of watching and waiting and never quite speaking up, and now finally she'd found her voice, even if it cost her everything. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to Chief growling, low, dangerous, the sound he'd made in the hospital corridor when he'd been protecting James. Zara's eyes snapped open. The room was dark. Too dark. The nightlight in the hallway was out. Chief's growl deepened. Someone was in the house. Zara's hand moved to her phone on the nightstand. Her fingers found it in the darkness just as Chief's growl turned into a bark. Sharp, warning, territorial. The bedroom door crashed open, but instead of an intruder, Maya burst through, weapon drawn, flashlight cutting through the dark. Federal marshals are down, she said, her voice clipped and military precise. 2 hostiles breached the perimeter. One's in the house. Zara was already moving, pulling on jeans, grabbing the go bag Rebecca had insisted she keep ready. Chief stayed between her and the door, every muscle coiled. "Where's the second hostile?" Zara asked. "Neutralized. The first marshal got him before—" Maya's voice caught. "Before he went down." Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Deliberate. Maya raised her weapon. "Federal officer, show yourself." The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, calm and professional. "Captain Vance? Ms. Vance? My employers would prefer this end quietly. Come out. We talk." Everyone walks away. "Not happening," Maya called back. "Then we do this the complicated way." A pause. "You have 10 seconds to reconsider." Maya was already pulling Zara toward the window. "Back exit now." But Zara grabbed Chief's collar, looked at her daughter. "If we run, they'll just try again. Different place, different time." "So what do you want to do? Fight a professional killer with a dog and harsh language?" "I want to make them explain on camera why they're murdering a federal witness." Maya stared at her. "You've lost your mind." "Probably." Zara pulled out her phone, opened the video app, hit record. "But if I'm going to die tonight, everyone's going to see why." She stepped toward the doorway. "Mom, don't." But Zara was already moving, phone held up, camera pointed forward. Chief moved with her, pressed against her leg. The hallway was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the window. A figure stood at the far end, average height, dark clothing, face obscured, professional. No wasted movement. "You're recording," the man said, statement, not question. "Live streaming," Zara lied. "Thousands of people watching right now, so whatever you do next, it's public." A pause. The man's posture shifted slightly, calculating. "You're bluffing." "Try me." Behind her, Maya moved into position, weapon trained on the intruder. "Drop your weapon, now." "Can't do that, Captain. Nothing personal, just business." "Business?" Zara repeated, keeping the camera steady. "That's what you call murdering witnesses? Business?" "I call it solving problems for people who pay well." The man's tone was almost conversational. "You should have taken the settlement, Ms. Vance, gone away quietly. But you had to be difficult." "Difficult," Zara said. "That's what they called me at the hospital, too. Right before a veteran died because nobody would listen to the difficult nurse." "Ancient history. You won. The bad guys are getting prosecuted. You could have walked away a hero." The figure's hand moved slightly. "Instead, you pushed, demanded congressional testimony, made yourself too visible to ignore." "So Meridian sent you." "Meridian doesn't exist anymore. Not as you knew it. The executives you indicted, they've already fled the country. New identities, offshore accounts, the works." A pause. "They left instructions. Loose ends to tie up." "I'm a loose end." "You're the loose end. Get rid of you. The families lose their champion. The investigation loses momentum. Everything dies down." The man's posture relaxed slightly. "But here's the thing. I don't actually want to kill you. You're a nurse, a veteran, someone who tried to do the right thing. Killing you feels wasteful." "Then don't," Maya said. "Can't afford not to. $500,000 is a lot of money." The man took a step forward. "But I'll make it quick, painless. Better than you'd get from the next contractor they send." Chief's growl dropped an octave. "Last chance," the man said. "Turn off the camera. We talk settlement. You disappear for real this time, I tell my employers you're handled. Everyone wins." "Except the families still waiting for justice," Zara said. "Except the next veteran who walks into a hospital and gets murdered for profit. Except everyone who believes that speaking up against powerful people is too dangerous. Noble, also stupid. Yeah, well, I've been called worse." The man's hand moved toward his weapon. Chief lunged. 90 pounds of trained military dog hit the intruder mid-torso, teeth finding the gun arm before the weapon even cleared its holster. The man went down hard, cursing, trying to shake the dog loose. Maya was on him in seconds, weapon pressed to his skull, while she kicked his gun away. "Don't move, don't breathe, don't think." Chief backed off at Maya's command but stayed ready, a low rumble in his chest. "Federal marshals are 3 minutes out," Maya said, her voice steel. "You're done." But the man just laughed, bitter and resigned. You think arresting me matters? I'm the third contractor they've sent. There'll be a fourth, a fifth, however many it takes. Then they'll keep failing, Zara said, still recording, because I'm not the only one who knows the truth anymore. I'm just the one willing to say it out loud. The sound of sirens split the night. Red and blue lights painted the walls. The cavalry had arrived late, but they'd arrived. 2 hours later, Zara sat in a federal building downtown giving her statement for the third time. The would-be assassin, whose name turned out to be Marcus Webb, former military contractor with an impressive resume of black ops work, had decided cooperation was preferable to a murder conspiracy charge. He gave them everything. The names of the Meridian executives who'd hired him, the offshore accounts they'd used to pay him, the instructions they'd given for making Zara's death look like a random home invasion. And most importantly, he confirmed what Zara had suspected. This wasn't just about silencing her. It was about sending a message to every other potential whistleblower. Speak up and die. We've got enough to file additional charges, the federal prosecutor told Zara as dawn broke over Seattle. Conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. The Meridian executives who fled? They just went from white-collar criminals to fugitives facing life sentences. Will you catch them? Zara asked. Eventually. We've already frozen their assets, flagged their passports, contacted international authorities. They can run, but they can't hide forever. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Zara just felt tired. The congressional testimony happened 3 days later in a hearing room packed with cameras, reporters, and politicians eager to look tough on veteran issues. Zara sat at the witness table in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, her hands folded in front of her, while congressmen and congresswomen took turns asking questions designed more for sound bites than answers. But when it was her turn to speak, really speak, not just answer yes or no questions, she didn't hold back. James Kowalski survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. He survived combat, IEDs, firefights, and the kind of trauma most people can't imagine. He came home with invisible wounds, and he tried to get help through the system we promised would be there for him. She looked directly at the cameras. That system failed him, not because of one bad doctor or one negligent hospital, but because of a rot that goes deeper, because corporations have turned veteran healthcare into a profit center, because oversight is weak and accountability is optional, because speaking up gets you labeled difficult instead of diligent. Someone in the back row started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, half the gallery was applauding. The committee chairman gavelled for order, but Zara wasn't done. I'm a nurse. I don't have medical degrees or fancy credentials. What I have is 20 years of watching patients suffer because the people with credentials cared more about being right than being effective. Her voice hardened. James Kowalski died because Dr. Marcus Hayward wouldn't listen to someone beneath him on the medical hierarchy. And Meridian Financial Group saw that kind of negligence and weaponized it. She pulled out a folder, held it up. This contains the names of 63 veterans who died under suspicious circumstances at facilities with Meridian contracts. 63 families who were told their loved ones died from complications, from unfortunate circumstances, from acceptable medical risks. She set the folder down hard enough that the microphone picked it up. Those families deserve the truth. They deserve accountability. And they deserve to know that the system that failed their loved ones is being fixed, not just slapped with fines and allowed to rebrand. The chairman leaned forward. Ms. Vance, what specific reforms would you recommend? Independent oversight of VA pharmaceutical protocols, mandatory reporting of adverse drug interactions, third-party review of all veteran deaths in psychiatric facilities, criminal penalties for executives who prioritize profit over patient care, and maybe, just maybe, start listening to nurses when they raise concerns, instead of dismissing them because they don't have the right letters after their names. The applause this time was louder, sustained. Zara sat back, her hands shaking slightly under the table where the cameras couldn't see. She'd said it. Everything she'd wanted to say for 20 years. And people had listened. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, 3 separate congressional committees had pledged investigations. The VA secretary had been summoned to testify. 2 senators had announced legislation mandating reforms. It was more than Zara had dared hope for. But the moment that mattered most came during a break, when a woman approached her in the corridor. late 50s, dressed in black, her face lined with grief. "Miss Vance? I'm Sarah Lindstrom's mother." Zara's breath stopped. The Marine who'd died in Kandahar. The one Zara had been doing CPR on another patient when Lindstrom took the hit. "I'm so sorry," Zara said, the words automatic and insufficient. "Your daughter saved 3 people by holding that position," Mrs. Lindstrom interrupted. "I read the after-action report, the real one, not the sanitized version they send to families. I know what happened that day." Zara waited for the accusation, the blame, the question of why her daughter had died while others lived. Instead, Mrs. Lindstrom took her hand. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for making the choices nobody should have to make, for living with them afterward, and for using that experience to save others." Zara's throat closed up. "I didn't save James Kowalski." "No, but you're saving the next one, and the one after that." Mrs. Lindstrom squeezed her hand once, then let go. "Sarah would have liked that. She believed people should fight for each other. Looks like you do, too." She walked away before Zara could respond, disappearing into the crowd of reporters and congressional staffers and advocates. Maya found her 10 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. "You okay?" Lindstrom's mother was here. Maya went very still. "What did she say?" "Thank you." Zara's voice cracked. After 20 years of carrying that guilt, she said, "Thank you." Maya pulled her into a hug. "Told you. You did everything right." "Doesn't feel like it." "It never does. But that doesn't make it less true." The trial of Dr. Marcus Hayward began 6 weeks later in a federal courthouse in Virginia, where the Meridian conspiracy charges gave prosecutors jurisdiction. Zara testified for 2 days straight, walking the jury through every decision, every warning, every moment where Hayward had chosen protocol over patient care. His defense team tried everything, questioned her credentials, her memory, her motives, brought in expert witnesses to testify that Hayward had followed standard psychiatric protocols, painted Zara as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. But then the prosecution played the video, the one Zara had recorded the night Marcus Webb broke into her safe house. The professional killer explaining, on camera, that Meridian executives had ordered Zara dead to protect their conspiracy. The courtroom went silent as Webb's voice filled the space. "Get rid of you. The families lose their champion. The investigation loses momentum." The defense tried to object, claimed the video was inflammatory and prejudicial. The judge overruled them, because the video didn't just prove someone wanted Zara dead, it proved why. And that why connected directly to Hayward's knowing participation in a pharmaceutical testing scheme that had killed veterans. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Hayward's face went white as the verdicts were read. Conspiracy, involuntary manslaughter, medical fraud, federal racketeering. The judge set sentencing for 3 months out but denied bail. "Dr. Hayward, your actions have brought dishonor to the medical profession and resulted in the deaths of vulnerable patients who trusted you with their care. You will remain in federal custody until sentencing." As marshals led him away, Hayward looked directly at Zara. She met his eyes, didn't look away. 20 years ago she would have. Would have kept her head down, avoided confrontation, let him have the last word. Not anymore. The hospital's civil settlement came through a week later. Cascade Regional agreed to pay $15 million to be distributed among the families of the veterans who'd died. They also agreed to terminate their contract with all Meridian-affiliated research programs, implement new patient safety protocols, and submit to 5 years of federal oversight. Jennifer Brennan called Zara the day the settlement was announced. "We're using Tommy's portion to start a foundation," she said, "for veteran mental health advocacy. We want to name it after your case. The Kowalski-Vance Foundation." "You don't have to." "We want to, because Tommy died invisible. But you made sure everyone saw. That matters." The foundation launched 3 months later. Zara sat on the board alongside family members of the other victims, veteran advocates, and psychiatric healthcare professionals who actually understood combat trauma. Their first initiative, a hotline for veterans experiencing psychiatric crises, staffed by people who understood that PTSD wasn't weakness, that asking for help took courage, and that sometimes the person in scrubs knew more than the person with the prescription pad. The second initiative, training programs for civilian hospitals treating veteran patients, teaching them about service dogs, about combat trauma, about the unique challenges of transitioning from military to civilian healthcare. Zara led the training programs herself. It felt strange at first, standing in front of doctors and nurses and administrators, teaching them what she'd learned over 20 years of being ignored. But Maya stood beside her, and together they made sure every lesson was grounded in the reality of what had happened to James Kowalski. "You're not just treating PTSD," Zara told a room full of psychiatric staff at a hospital in Portland. "You're treating someone whose brain has been rewired by combat, someone who sees threats where you see safety, someone whose service dog isn't a pet, it's a survival tool." She pulled up a photo of James Kowalski in chief. This man survived 2 tours in Afghanistan. His dog helped him survive coming home, and when a psychiatrist decided the dog was more trouble than it was worth, both of them paid the price. The room was silent. "So here's what I'm asking you to do. When a veteran tells you something's wrong, listen. When a nurse raises a concern, listen. When someone without the right credentials says the protocol isn't working, listen." Zara's voice hardened. "Because credentials don't mean anything if you're not actually paying attention." After the training session, a young psychiatrist approached her. Fresh out of residency, earnest in the way people were before the system ground them down. "I heard about your case," he said, "about what you did. It's why I specialized in veteran mental health." "Don't make me your hero," Zara said. "I'm just someone who didn't want more people to die." "That's exactly why you're a hero." Zara didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded and moved on to the next person waiting to talk to her. But later, driving home with Maya, she thought about it. "Do you think I'm a hero?" she asked. Maya glanced at her. "I think you're someone who was invisible for 20 years and then decided being seen was worth the cost. So, yeah, that's pretty heroic." "Doesn't feel heroic. Feels like I just got tired of watching people suffer." "Same thing, Mom. Heroes aren't people who aren't afraid. They're people who do what needs doing anyway." 6 months after the trial, the sentencing hearing brought everyone back to Virginia. Zara sat in the gallery with the families, with Rebecca, with Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, who'd flown in from D.C., doctor. Marcus Hayward stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive lawyers flanking him, and listened as victim impact statements were read. Jennifer Brennan spoke about Tommy, about a brother who'd survived war only to die in what should have been a safe place. Maria Gonzalez's parents spoke through tears about their daughter, about how she'd been a Marine, a mother, a fighter who deserved better. Kevin Lamont's brother spoke about watching his sibling come home broken and then watching the system break him further. And then Maya stood. "James Kowalski saved my life in Kandahar," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I was trapped in a burning vehicle. He pulled me out, carried me to safety while taking fire. He risked his life for mine without hesitation." She looked directly at Hayward. "When he needed someone to save him, you chose your ego over his life. You chose protocol over compassion. You chose to ignore the one person who knew what he needed because she didn't have the right credentials." Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "My mother tried to save him. You stopped her. And then you tried to destroy her for speaking up. So when this judge sentences you, I want you to remember, you didn't just kill a veteran. You tried to silence the person who cared enough to fight for him." Maya sat down. The judge took off his glasses, looked at Hayward for a long moment. "Dr. Hayward, you held a position of trust. Patients came to you vulnerable and seeking help. Instead of providing care, you made them subjects in an unauthorized pharmaceutical trial that prioritized profit over human life. You ignored warnings from qualified staff. And when confronted with the consequences of your actions, you attempted to destroy the whistleblower rather than accept accountability." The judge put his glasses back on. "I'm sentencing you to 15 years in federal prison for involuntary manslaughter to run consecutively with an additional 10 years for conspiracy and racketeering. You will serve a minimum of 20 years before being eligible for parole, and you will never practice medicine again." Hayward's knees buckled slightly. His lawyers caught him. In the gallery, Jennifer Brennan reached over and squeezed Zara's hand. It wasn't enough. 25 years couldn't bring back 5 dead veterans. But it was something. The Meridian executives were never caught. They'd scattered to countries without extradition treaties, living off offshore accounts that investigators would spend years trying to freeze. But their company was dismantled, their contracts voided, their names toxic in every industry they'd touched. The VA implemented new protocols within a year: independent oversight, mandatory adverse event reporting, criminal penalties for executives who prioritized profit over patient care. They called it the Kowalski Act. James's name was now permanently attached to legislation protecting veterans from the kind of systematic negligence that had killed him. Zara stood in front of his grave on a cold November morning, Chief sitting beside her, and tried to find the right words. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," she said finally, "but I made sure they can't do this to anyone else. I hope that counts for something." Chief's tail wagged once. Zara knelt down, ran her hand over the headstone. James Kowalski, Sergeant, U.S. Army. 2 tours, Afghanistan. Purple Heart, Bronze Star. And now, underneath those honors, someone had added a new line. His death changed everything. "Yeah," Zara whispered. "It did." She left flowers, nothing fancy, just whatever was blooming at the grocery store, and walked back to her car where Maya was waiting. "You good?" her daughter asked, getting there. They drove back to Seattle in comfortable silence, past the hospital where it had all started, past the federal building where Zara had first met with Reeves, past the safe house where someone had tried to kill her for refusing to stay quiet, past all the places where she'd been invisible, and then suddenly, devastatingly visible. Her phone rang as they pulled into her apartment complex. "Rebecca." "There's someone who wants to meet you," her lawyer said. "Senator Morrison, the one who's been pushing the VA reforms through Congress." "What does he want?" "To offer you a job. Deputy Director of Veteran Patient Advocacy, reporting directly to the VA Secretary. Full-time position, DC-based, with the authority to investigate complaints and recommend systemic changes." Zara almost laughed. "I'm a nurse, not a bureaucrat." "You're a nurse who just took down a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy and changed federal law. That makes you exactly the kind of bureaucrat they need." "I don't want to move to DC." "They're flexible on location. You could work remote, travel when needed." Rebecca paused. "Zara, this is a real opportunity to make lasting change, not just through one case, but through the whole system." "Let me think about it." "Fair enough. But the senator wants an answer by next week." After Rebecca hung up, Maya looked at her. "You're going to say yes?" "I haven't decided." "Yes, you have. You're just trying to figure out how to say yes without admitting you want it." Zara pulled into a parking spot, killed the engine. "It's a lot. DC, federal government, being public. You've been public for a year now. Might as well get paid for it." "What about you? Your transfer?" "Already approved. Stateside assignment, trauma training division. I can be based anywhere." Maya grinned. "So if you end up in DC, I'll request reassignment there. If you stay in Seattle, I'm already here. Either way, you're stuck with me." "Could be worse." "Could be a lot worse." They went upstairs to Zara's apartment, the real one, not the safe house. She'd moved back in a month ago, after the security team decided the threat level had decreased enough. Chief immediately claimed the couch, his favorite spot. Zara made tea while Maya pulled up housing listings on her laptop, already planning the next phase like the mission-oriented officer she was. "There's a place near the VA headquarters," Maya said. 2-bedroom, allows dogs, 20-minute commute." "I haven't said yes yet." "But you're going to." Zara sat down across from her daughter, cradling her tea. Thought about the job offer, about spending her days investigating complaints, advocating for patients, making sure what happened to James Kowalski never happened again. About being visible. Permanently, professionally visible. 20 years ago, that would have terrified her. Now? "Yeah," she said finally. "I'm going to say yes." Maya's smile was brilliant. About time. The acceptance call went through the next morning. By afternoon, Zara was being briefed on her new role, her team, her mandate. By the end of the week, she'd given notice on her apartment and started packing. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday. Zara stood in her empty apartment, Chief beside her, and thought about everything that had happened here. The phone calls with Maya, The late-night strategy sessions with Rebecca. The threats and the fear and the moments when she'd almost given up. The place where she'd finally stopped being invisible. "Ready?" Maya asked from the doorway. "Almost." Zara walked through the rooms one last time. Kitchen, where she'd made too much coffee and not enough sleep. Living room, where she'd watched her face on the news over and over as the story exploded. Bedroom, where Chief had warned her about an intruder trying to kill her. The place where everything had changed. "Okay," she said. "I'm ready." They drove to D.C. in Maya's car, Chief in the back seat, their entire lives packed into a moving truck following behind. Stopped at roadside diners and cheap motels, took the long way through places Zara had never seen. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, Maya asked the question Zara had been waiting for. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Zara thought about that, about James Kowalski dying while she worked on someone else, about the 20 years she'd spent being invisible, about the moment she'd decided being seen was worth the risk. "No," she said. "I regret that it took me 20 years to find my voice, but once I did, no regrets." "Even with everything they put you through?" "Especially because of everything they put me through, because it proved they were scared. And people only get scared when you're close to something they can't afford to lose." Maya nodded slowly. "What would you tell someone in the same position? Nurse who sees something wrong but doesn't have the credentials to be taken seriously?" "I'd tell them it's not about credentials, it's about being willing to stand up when everyone else is sitting down." Zara looked out at the highway stretching ahead. "I'd tell them it's going to cost them, their job, their peace, maybe their safety. But the alternative, staying silent while people suffer, costs more." "That's good. You should put that in your training materials." "Maybe I will." They arrived in D.C. on a Tuesday afternoon, the city gleaming and imposing in a way Seattle never was. Power concentrated into monuments and marble buildings, and the machinery of government grinding forward, regardless of who got caught in the gears. Zara's new office was on the 4th floor of the VA headquarters, with a window overlooking the National Mall. Her nameplate read, "Zara Vance, Deputy Director, Veteran Patient Advocacy." No mention of her nursing credentials, no MD or PhD. Just her name and her job. It felt right. Her first day was orientation, paperwork, meeting the team. Her second day was testifying before yet another congressional committee about implementation of the Kowalski Act. Her third day was a site visit to a VA hospital in Baltimore where a veteran had filed a complaint about psychiatric treatment. The complaint turned out to be valid. Zara spent 8 hours reviewing charts, interviewing staff, and documenting failures in the intake protocol. By the end of the day, she'd recommended immediate changes, staff retraining, and a formal apology to the veteran. The hospital administrator tried to push back. "Miss Vance, with all due respect, you're not a psychiatrist." "No," Zara said. "I'm the person who makes sure psychiatrists listen to patients. And right now you've got a veteran telling you his treatment plan isn't working. So you can either adjust the plan, or I can recommend this hospital lose its VA accreditation. Your choice." The administrator chose to adjust the plan. Word spread fast. Within a month, Zara had a reputation as the advocate who didn't back down. The one who'd taken on Meridian and won. The one who actually listened to veterans instead of dismissing their concerns as complications of PTSD. The complaints started pouring in. She triaged them with the same precision she'd used in combat. Critical cases got immediate attention. Systematic issues got routed to policy teams. Individual grievances got personal follow-up. She worked 60-hour weeks and loved every minute of it. 6 months into the job, she was invited to speak at a nursing conference in Atlanta. The topic: advocating for patients when the system resists. She almost said no. Public speaking still made her nervous. But then she thought about all the nurses sitting in audiences, being told to stay in their lane, to defer to doctors, to not make waves. She said yes. The conference room was packed, standing room only. Nurses from across the country who'd heard her story and wanted to know how she'd done it. Zara stood at the podium, looked out at hundreds of faces, and felt something settle in her chest. "I spent 20 years being invisible," she began. 20 years watching patients suffer because I didn't have the credentials to be taken seriously. 20 years convincing myself that keeping my head down was the same as keeping my integrity." She paused. "I was wrong. Silence isn't integrity, it's complicity. And every time I stayed quiet while a doctor made a bad call, every time I didn't push back on a protocol that wasn't working, I was choosing comfort over courage. Someone in the back started applauding. Then another. Within seconds, the whole room was on its feet. Zara waited for them to settle. So here's what I learned. Credentials don't make you right. Experience does. Paying attention does. Giving a damn does. Her voice strengthened. And when you see something wrong, when you know in your gut that a patient is being harmed, you have an obligation to speak up, even if it costs you, especially if it costs you. The questions afterward lasted 2 hours. Nurses asking how to handle dismissive doctors, unsupportive administration, legal threats. Zara answered each one honestly, not sugarcoating the risks, but also not minimizing the necessity. Will you get punished for speaking up? Probably. Will it be worth it? Ask the patients whose lives you save. After the conference, a young nurse approached her. Couldn't have been more than 25, still had that fresh graduate optimism that the system hadn't beaten out of her yet. I work in a VA hospital, she said quietly. I've been seeing things. Shortcuts, questionable medication combinations, staff ignoring patient complaints. I've been documenting everything, but I'm scared if I report it, I'll lose my job. Zara pulled out a business card. Her direct line at the VA. Send me your documentation. I'll investigate. And if they try to fire you for reporting, they'll have to explain it to me personally. The nurse's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't stop paying attention. The system needs people like you. Flying back to DC that night, Zara thought about that conversation. About a young nurse scared to speak up because the cost felt too high. About herself 20 years ago, making the same calculation. About how many patients had suffered because she'd chosen silence. She pulled out her laptop, started drafting a new policy proposal. Whistleblower protections for VIA medical staff, anonymous reporting systems, mandatory investigation protocols for patient complaints. She was still working on it when Maya called. How was the conference? Good, exhausting, important. Zara saved her document. I'm writing a new policy, protection for medical staff who report safety concerns. Of course you are. But there was warmth in Maya's voice. Pride. You ever going to take a day off? When there's nothing left to fix. So never. Probably. A year after starting at the VA, Zara received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from New Mexico. It was from Paulina Kowalski, the real one, not the fake plaintiff from the fraudulent lawsuit. Dear Ms. Vance, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to reach out because I recently learned about my husband's nephew, James. We lost touch with him years ago. Family estrangement, the kind of sad story you hear too often. I only learned about his death when the news coverage mentioned my name in connection with the case. I'm writing to thank you. Not just for fighting for justice for James, but for making sure his death meant something. My husband passed away 5 years ago. He would have been devastated to know James died alone, but he would have been proud to know someone like you stood up for him. I'm donating to the Kowalski-Vance Foundation in both their names. It seems fitting. Thank you for your courage. Sincerely, Paulina Kowalski. Zara read the letter 3 times, then filed it carefully in her desk drawer with the other reminders of why this work mattered. The second year brought new challenges. Pushback from hospital administrators who didn't like federal oversight. Budget fights with congressional committees who thought veteran advocacy was expensive. Media attention that never quite went away. But it also brought wins. A veteran in Texas whose complaint about psychiatric care led to an investigation that uncovered systematic failures across an entire VA network. A nurse in Ohio who reported unsafe medication practices and, instead of being fired, was promoted to patient safety director. A policy change requiring all VA facilities to accommodate service animals, with training for staff on how to integrate them into treatment plans. Each win was small in the grand scheme of things, but small wins added up. On the 3rd anniversary of James Kowalski's death, Zara stood at his grave again. This time, she wasn't alone. Maya stood beside her. Rebecca had flown in from Seattle. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves had driven down from the Pentagon. Jennifer Brennan was there with her kids. Maria Gonzalez's parents. Kevin Lamont's brother. All the families whose lives had been destroyed by Meridian's conspiracy. All the people who'd chosen to fight instead of disappear. "We've made some changes," Zara said, addressing the small group gathered around the grave. "The Kowalski Act is law. Meridian's executives are fugitives. Cascade Regional has new protocols. The VA has independent oversight." She looked at the headstone. "It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. And we're going to keep fighting until every veteran who needs help actually gets it." Jennifer Brennan stepped forward, laid flowers on her brother's grave. "Thank you for not forgetting them." "I couldn't forget even if I wanted to," Zara said. "They're the reason I wake up every morning and keep fighting." After the memorial, the group dispersed slowly. Promises to stay in touch, to keep fighting, to honor the dead by protecting the living. Maya hung back with Zara as the sun set over the cemetery. "You've changed the world, you know," Maya said quietly. "I've changed some policies. That's not the same thing." "Tell that to the veterans who are alive because someone finally listened to their complaints. Tell that to the nurses who aren't afraid to speak up anymore. Tell that to the families who got justice instead of excuses." Zara looked at James's grave one more time. "I just didn't want him to die for nothing." "He didn't. Because of you." They walked back to the car together, Chief trailing behind them. The sky was purple and gold, the air crisp with autumn. Somewhere in Virginia, Marcus Hayward was sitting in a federal prison cell. Somewhere in the world, Meridian executives were looking over their shoulders, waiting for extradition. Somewhere in Seattle, a hospital was following new protocols that prioritize patients over profit. And in Washington, D.C., Zara Vance had an office with her name on it, and the authority to make damn sure no other veteran died the way James Kowalski had. It wasn't perfect. The system was still broken in 1,000 ways. There were still veterans falling through cracks, still administrators prioritizing budgets over care, still doctors who didn't listen to nurses. But now there was someone fighting back. Someone who'd been invisible for 20 years and decided visibility was worth the cost. Someone who'd learned that credentials didn't matter as much as courage, and that being difficult was just another word for being right when everyone else was wrong. Someone who'd taken on a multi-billion-dollar corporation, survived assassination attempts, endured public scrutiny and character assassination, and won, not because she was special, but because she refused to stay silent while people suffered. That night, back in her D.C. apartment, Zara sat at her desk reviewing the next day's case files. A complaint from a veteran in Nevada about medication interactions. A whistleblower report from a nurse in Florida about inadequate PTSD screening. A policy review request from a senator's office. Each file represented a person. A veteran who needed help. A nurse who needed support. A system that needed fixing. Each file was a chance to make the choice she hadn't made 20 years ago. The choice to speak up instead of staying silent. To fight instead of hiding. To be seen instead of invisible. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Dinner tomorrow? Found a place that allows dogs." Zara smiled, typed back, "Sounds good. 7 p.m.? Perfect. Love you, Mom." "Love you too." She set down her phone, looked around her apartment. Pictures on the wall now. Her and Maya. The memorial service. The congressional hearing where she'd testified. Chief asleep on his bed in the corner, snoring softly. A life that was messy and public, and completely different from the invisible existence she'd maintained for 2 decades. A life that mattered. Not because she was a hero, not because she was special, but because when it counted, when it would have been easier to stay quiet, she'd chosen to speak. And that choice, that single moment of courage in a hospital corridor, telling a doctor he was wrong, had changed everything. For James Kowalski, it had come too late. But for every veteran who came after him, it was right on time. Zara closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow there would be more complaints to investigate, more policies to draft, more fights to win. But tonight, she could rest knowing she'd finally found the thing she'd been searching for over 20 years of invisible service. A voice that mattered, a purpose that counted, and the knowledge that being difficult, being stubborn, being unwilling to back down when everyone told her to, that wasn't a character flaw. It was exactly what the world needed.